The story begins with the 15th birthday of the 17th Prince Gil. As a gift, his father gave him his own domain. The task of the prince was to go to Earth and restore order on it. The prince traveled from the capital to a remote island that even pirates are afraid to approach, Xialrifu. The island itself was more like a huge rock. The entire journey was supposed to take 10 days by boat. The island of Xialrifu is the domain of the 17th prince of the kingdom of Sanfaris, an island that doesn't have a beach or a berth. For the 11th Prince Valpas and 9th Princess Talia, the news was a joyous one. In the kingdom of Sanfaris, every person is born with a coat of arms and power. All of the 17th prince's brothers have beautiful crests and abilities befitting crests. Prince Heel has poor abilities, but this is not the main reason for ridicule in his direction. Prince Hill has no way of activating his coat of arms, the sign of which no one can understand. His father and brothers are unhappy with this phenomenon, saying that in this way the 17th prince brought shame on the royal family. Prince Hill was displeased with his father's decision, saying that any representative of the king could be sent to this reef. In response, King Rui only said that this was the oracle's word. Thus, the 17th prince of the kingdom of Sanfaris was exiled. Prince Hila was struggling with two thoughts. Would it be better to execute him for treason, or is it too early to die? When it was time to dock, the prince decided that he should slow down, so as not to break on the stone reef. The prince decided to use the power of the wind for this. It turned out to be a bad decision. The 17th prince didn't succeed. This is the power of the magic of the exiled, Prince Gil. The wind magic should have caused a strong gust of wind, but the prince did not succeed. At the dock, the prince decided to move his supplies to a safe place. At the same time, he saw a cave, which he then decided to hide supplies. There were a lot of skeletons of dead people in the cave. Despite everything, the prince still delivered his supplies to the cave, trying to ignore the pile of skulls. The view of the sea was beautiful, as was the prince's realization that he was now away from the hustle and bustle of the capital. Prince Hill had finally decided that he needed to survive at all costs. Thinking through the rescue plan, Heel decided to wait for help from a pirate ship or foreign ships. He knew that at best he would become a slave, and there were no merchants or fishermen in the vicinity. Putting aside the idea of a rescue plan, the prince began to think about his supplies. The food he brought will last for a month, at best. He can't rely on his magic, so he decided to store rainwater and fish in barrels. Next, the prince decided to clear the cave of bones, burying them. He will do this with a pickaxe. As soon as the prince picked up the tool, a voice came out of nowhere announcing the purchase of a mining tool. The prince was very surprised and decided that it was a voice in his head and asked him to repeat the words. The voice repeated its previous words and also asked if Prince Hill was going to start mining. Then the prince was convinced of his previous assumption and asked who was still talking in his head. The voice introduced itself as the coat of arms, King of the Cave, which serves as an advisor. The coat of arms is also not a living organism. Previously, while living in the royal palace, Prince Hill couldn't awaken his coat of arms. Now, being strongly connected to the cave, his mark showed up. In addition to the advisor function, the 17th prince can upgrade his loot skills and level up inside the cave. When you are about to start mining, you can activate mining optimization. Optimization allows you to determine the most suitable places for mining. In addition, the locations are defined so that the risk of collapse during mining is 0. With one light blow, Heel shattered the stone wall of the cave. To make it even easier for him, Herb activated the night vision effect. Hill continued to dig, making room for himself to spend the night while enjoying himself. Each time the size of the stones increases. However, this is not a problem for the hero, since the amount that Heel can dig at a time increases as the mining skills increase. All extracted materials can be stored in unlimited quantities. In addition, the extracted inventory can be retrieved at any time. Activating the automatic ore search, Heel began to dig at an extraordinary speed. The place mark also notifies you about the distance from the starting point. The hill is 10 meters deep, but the hero is not familiar with this measure of length. In a short time, Heel's inventory was full of various materials. gold, bronze, and other ores could be seen among the extracted materials. An unusual and unknown ore turned out to be a magic ore. Magic ore increases the user's magic power based on their size. In addition to the magic ore, among the inventory, the turtle stone was unexplored, which increases the user's lifetime by 1 day. From that moment on, Hill began to take pride in his coat of arms and enjoy his possessions, namely the island of Sheol Reef. Once the 17th prince continued mining and completely forgot about the rescue plan. In a short time, Hill was at a depth of 30 meters, and in his inventory there were more than 10 types of minerals. Hill focused on magic ore and turtle stone. Hill decided to use 90 magic stones to use more advanced magic. After using it, the physical body didn't feel any changes. To test the magic stones, Hill decided to use wind magic to clear the path he had dug. Wind magic created a storm that swept away everything in its path. A mere 90 crystals raised Hill's magic level to an impossible level. From nowhere, an unexplored creature jumped on Hill, which he himself sees live for the first time. 3 days had passed since the appointment of the once Prince Gil to be in charge of the uninhabited island, which was more like a mountain of rocks. Although he was more exiled than appointed to an official position. Hill was checking supplies, food and tools. Prince Hill dug almost every day. After encountering the aforementioned unknown creature, Hill no longer traveled alone. To this creature, Hill gave the name Shell. The prince used it as a transport, and Shell was also the 17th prince's first companion. When they first met, Herb had imagined the creature as a tame monster. Hill had read about this monster in a book once. The monster was slime. The slime was probably afraid of the wind magic used by Prince Hill earlier. In the kingdom of Sanfaris, monsters were not tolerated, they were hated. However, on the uninhabited island of Sheol Reef, Prince Gil has no one to reprimand or punish. To tame the monster, Hill had to give the slime a name. A good solution was to give a name associated with the location, namely, the island of Sheol Reef. So the monster was named Shell and was tamed by the exiled 17th prince of Sanfaris, Hill. The slime doesn't understand human language, but it is a living thing, a living organism, which helps the healer feel better. So the prince thought. Surprisingly, the monster was very smart. Due to its ability to take on different forms, the slime was able to make Hill's job much easier. It took 5 seconds to reach the ceiling of the cave. Hill could communicate his thoughts through gestures. Thanks to Shell, the Gila mining industry has developed faster. In the past 3 days, the amount of materials in the prince's inventory had tripled. In all that time, Hill had used 500 magic stones. Thanks to the prince's enhanced magic, food was no longer a problem for him. The slime also served as a pillow for Hill. In addition to Shell, Hill had tamed 10 other slugs, but they weren't as smart as his first companion. Shell is a special monster. Hill was willing to let tamed monsters do anything that didn't interfere with his mining. At the end of the day, Hill always thought about what and where he would dig tomorrow. The next day, right out of his sleep, Hill noticed Shell's strange behavior. After asking Shell about the reason for his uncharacteristic behavior, Gil got nothing in return, and Shell continued to jump around the prince. Shell did not stand on ceremony with the prince, systematically threw heel on himself and drove in an unknown direction away from the cave. When they came to a steep drop and a huge rock at the end of it, Gil was startled. This descent was successfully completed, but there was no time to rejoice, as right behind the stone was a pile of dead, at first glance, bodies. The dead men's skin was green, so Heel guessed they were goblins. Most likely, their boat crashed into rocky rocks. Gil was startled when one of the goblins let out a plaintive moan. Humans and goblins are at war. Most people are taught that the first time they see a goblin, they must be killed. However, Shell brought the hero for a reason, and Heel himself did not want to leave the goblins, condemning them to certain death. Heel used recovery magic to heal the goblins. After that, Heel carried the wounded to the cave, leaving no goblins behind. Their lives were no longer in danger. Leaving the wounded on the Shella, Gil lost himself in thought. He couldn't help but feel that he was being too careless, and it made him worry. However, he can now use magic. To put off the excitement, Hill decided to dig. He did it with every effort. He dug for a while longer. Forgetting about his excitement, Hill decided to check out the inventory. For sure there will be more of it. After checking his supplies, Hill noticed 2 new stones that are useless to him. A misogi stone that removes curses and a shining stone that always shines. However, new materials are always good. Hill continued digging. Suddenly, a sound that suspiciously resembled goblin sounds was heard from the cave. Shell went to check it out. Hillu could clearly hear the dialogue between a certain princess, a general, and another goblin. While the general wanted to eat the food, the princess stopped him, and the third agreed with the princess, objecting to the general. As Heel approached the goblins, the goblin general pointed his weapon at Heel. The princess again stopped the general, saying that the prince was their savior. At that time, Gil only stared in surprise, realizing that they were speaking the same language and making assumptions about whether they were beings from the Balon continent. Heel slowly approached the goblins, assuring them that he had no ill intentions. However, the goblin general said not to approach, saying that he couldn't trust the human. Heel felt strange. The goblin general himself was acting very hostile, and it was very similar to fear. The goblins were really afraid of Heel and what he might do. The goblins' disbelief quickly turned to anger and anger. A minute of silence followed. The slime took a vertical flat position, and relying on its property, the ability of reflection, created a kind of mirror right in front of Hill. Looking in the mirror, Heel understood the reason for the goblin's fear. The prince's face screamed in every way that he was a very dangerous type. Quickly realizing his mistake, Heel changed his expression and tone. With a smile on his face, the prince gave permission for the use of his food. To inspire even more confidence, Heel used the power of the wind to get all the fish out of the barrel and offered them to eat. The goblin general still didn't trust the prince. He wondered why, with his magic so strong, Heel didn't kill them. At this time, the princess fell to her knees, weakly holding onto the general. Everyone panicked. Forgetting about the enmity, everyone headed towards the little princess. Gil was surprised that the princess's wounds didn't heal. The goblin told Hill about the life-shortening curse that had been placed on the princess. The princess used the last of her strength to say something to the goblins. In order to avoid getting punished by the ancestors, the general and another goblin decided to go together with their princess. At this point, Heel intervened, saying that he could help break the curse. The goblins didn't believe it, saying that they had tried everything. When talking about the method of removing the curse, Heel was referring to the misogi stone, which removes all types of curses. Heel used the misogi stone, and also, noticing that the princess' lifespan was shortened, used 79 turtle stones, leaving 10 just in case. The goblin general was in shock, not understanding what that light was, and how Heel got the stone that removes the curse. Before Hill could answer his question, all the attention was drawn to the healthy goblin princess, who was surprised by the news that she was still alive. At that moment, the goblin general bowed at Hill's feet and began to beg forgiveness from the princess savior with all his might, smashing a rock with his head at that time. The princess and another goblin were also thanking him. The prince invited the goblins to the table and asked them to introduce themselves. All 3 were from the Belden tribe: General L, the shaman Wary, and Ree, the daughter of the Belden king, Rodden. The hero himself also introduced himself as the prince of the kingdom of Sanfaris, Hill. At that moment, the goblin expressed an awareness of why Heel's magic was so powerful. Heel immediately explained that it was all thanks to the magic stones. Prince Hill asked the goblins what they were doing on the island of Sheolreath. It turned out that the goblins' hometown was burned down by the orcs. The entire royal family, except for the princess, was killed. For the past year, they had been searching for a place to survive, but no clan was willing to accept them, and neither were the humans. None of the 3 of them know about the situation of the other goblins of the Belden tribe. On a dilapidated ship, they barely made it to Stone Prince Island. After that, the young princess thanked Heel for saving her once again. The princess knew that she would not live long, but the pain in her chest disappeared, and now she can die in peace. Still, it's too early to give up. The cave is still full of turtle rocks. By collecting them, the princess's life can be extended for as long as they want. By digging at his own pace for a week, Hill could extend Princess Rai's life by more than a year. General Al asked that they be allowed to dig, too. Hill let them dig. General Al and Shaman Vari were thanking Hill again, but the princess didn't understand why the prince was doing so much for the goblins. Hill enjoys digging, and also being all alone is boring. The princess thanked Hill, crying with gratitude. In order to effectively dig with goblins, namely transfer their skills, goblins needed to be tamed. Hill told the goblins about this, adding that they could refuse. The prince could dig alone and give them as many stones as they needed. Vari and Al were taken aback and said they were ready to be tamed by Hill. Everyone was surprised when Princess Rai expressed her desire to be tamed by the prince. She explained her desire by saying that she did not want everyone to try for her. Thus, the general was given a new name Alvin, the shaman a new name Varys, and the princess a new name Rihanna. They are now tamed by Hill. After finishing their meal, they went to the cave. Since goblins can't see in the dark, Hill made a torch out of shining stone. Varys noticed the glowing places in the cave, and Rihanna noticed their beauty. After saying that these were safe places to mine, Hill started practicing by hitting one spot with a pickaxe. With a single blow, Hill shattered a huge rock. Everyone was in shock. The extracted materials aren't collected automatically, so Hill asked Shell to tell all the slugs to collect the extracted fossils. Since that day, the cave has become much busier. Gil was beaten up in a doorway by aristocrats. They enjoyed the sight of a pathetic Hill sitting on the ground, protecting the dragon. Pointing his hand at the dragon and Hill, the aristocrat is going to turn them into ashes with magic. Al and Ree called out to Hila, who was lost in thought. Hill had been digging a lot, and he was probably tired, Al thought. Gil assured them that he was just thinking. The coat of arms allows Hill to dig all day and not get tired. At that moment, Hill smelled a pleasant smell. The smell came from Rihanna's apple pie. 3 days had passed since the goblin encounter, and they had already done a lot of things. The first is a bathroom, a reservoir. The second is the kitchen. Thanks to this, Rihanna can cook Hila and goblins. Thanks to Rihanna, the food that Hill brought back from the kingdom turned into great dishes. Al gets a kick out of mining. Varys is also glad that they are helping the princess in this way. Rihanna is very grateful to Hill and the goblins. The situation is gradually improving. Despite this, the Hill can't get any food other than fish. The clothes will gradually deteriorate. Hill can only buy supplies if a ship passes by. Hill began to be visited by the manager's problems. Hill continued to dig, with the goal of getting more turtle stones for Rihanna and finding new ones. During the next blow in the wall, Hill found a certain space of unknown stones. These stones had an orange glow and looked like glowing stones. Hill noticed dirt under his feet. Looking up, Hill saw a huge spider monster in front of him. Gil was terrified, thinking of his own death. Quickly gathering himself, he was about to use his magic, but the spider ran away at the same time. Gil was surprised. Spider stepped in front of her children, shielding them from Hill's magic. Then Hill realized that she was only protecting her little spiders and that this was her lair. The mark informed Hill that he could tame the spider. At the same time, the goblins only realized that Hill wasn't with them. The goblins went looking for Hill, but he beat them to it. The prince calmly walked towards them. The goblins were telling Hill about the spider in the back. Hill explained that the spider is now with them. She was tamed by Hill. The spider's name is Terran. Varys was surprised by Terran's size. There are spiders the size of Varys on the continent. Cave spiders are very dangerous. They eat humans and monsters. Their silk is stronger than iron, and they have a powerful poison in their fangs. The dirt that Hill was asked to examine was Terran's. It is ideal for agriculture as a fertilizer. Varys expressed the idea that agriculture on the rocky island will not work. Then Gil showed them the tunnel. The tunnel was very deep. Gil widened the path for Terran. Hill has reached rank 2. There are new features: design creating a landshaft for mining, workshop processing and synthesizing materials. Scope workshop and inventory are available everywhere. In addition, tamed monsters can now see in the dark. The goblins and Hill decided to host a party for Taryn and her children. They decided to reconstruct the island. Varys, Rihanna, and Elvis made a Belden-style oven. Elvin and Varys made axes out of iron. Rihanna made things out of spider silk. Taryn and her children were engaged in farming. Taryn was very fast. After planting the seed, it grew into a huge apple tree with fruit in a matter of seconds. The stones found in Taryn Cave are called sunstones and accelerate the growth of living organisms. There weren't many of them in the cave, so Heel decided to keep them safe. Gil had entrusted the management of the sunstones to Rihanna, for which she was grateful. Rihanna was baking very hard and thinking about it, which made Gila trust her. Everyone did what they did best. Therefore, Hill was engaged in mining. Heel's goal was to get more turtle stones so that Rihanna would live at least another 5 years. To keep her alive even longer, the most efficient digger, Heel, works hard. During the excavation, Hill noticed an unusual white stone and took it away. After removing the stone from the ground, the mark told Hill about it. It was a dragon ball that could resurrect the dead. Gil was surprised. He called Taryn and the others to dig with him. However, they didn't find any more dragon balls. Heel decided to take the dragon ball out of the inventory, because if he dies, he won't be able to get the ball out of the inventory. Alvin called to Heel. Gil left the balloon on the pile of corpses and went to Elvin. Elvin saw the ship of his comrades. Gil didn't believe it at first, but Alvin insisted otherwise. Indeed, a huge ship was heading towards the island. Everyone was very happy that their relatives and comrades were alive. It was dangerous for the ship to dock right off the island, so Gil suggested that Alvin take his boat. Heel handed the goblins a bag of gold ore, presenting it as a parting gift. With this bag of gold, they could rebuild their tribe anywhere. The goblins were surprised by this. Gil went on to say that now that their friends had arrived, they had to leave this island. At the same time, Heel began to dream about how the goblins would bring him goods from outside in the future. The goblins were taken aback and looked at each other. Alvin shouted at them with an impressive volume not to abandon them. Gil was surprised. Alvin continued his monologue by saying that neither of them was going to leave. The only reason the goblins were going to take the boat back to their friends was to find out if their comrades were going to swear allegiance to Hill. Varys and Rihanna supported Alvin. Puzzled, Hill began to convince the goblins that this might be their only chance. Rihanna offered to go with them, in that case. That was what Heel had originally planned to do, but at that moment he thought better of it. Seeing Gil's hesitation, Rihanna said she wasn't going anywhere either. Alvin and Varys smiled broadly. At the same time, the ship capsized and the goblins were thrown into the sea. Most of the goblins can't swim, which made Alvin and the others worried. Rihanna ran after the boat, and Alvin and Varys followed. However, the speed and capacity of the boat were questionable. Hill started to panic as he recalled the situation with the little dragon, where he was helpless. Hill jumped off the cliff and into the water. The goblins were very surprised, not understanding why he jumped. Hill was attuned to the fact that it was not hopeless and believed in himself. The prince used 18,879 magic stones. Heel activated the ice magic. An ice path has formed on the sea. Everyone was very surprised. Heel was surprised, but he understood the power of magic stones. Elvin was ordered to leave the boat and walk across the ice to rescue the goblins. General Al quickly gathered himself and began rescuing his comrades. Everything was fine, apart from the fact that the track was slippery. This problem was solved by Taryn and her legs. After that, Elvin changed his mind about spiders. Together with other slugs, Shell was rescuing drowning goblin companions. In this way, the goblins, spiders, Heel, and Slime saved the goblins one by one. Heel healed each goblin in turn. Thanks to Hill, all 205 goblins were saved. General Al ran to hug his daughter with tears in his eyes. Fu was embarrassed. Fu thanked Heel. Hill said he couldn't have done it alone. The prince thanked them all. One goblin asked Heel who was standing behind him. Gil glanced back. The prince himself didn't know what kind of creature was behind him. This creature has not been on the ship and has not been seen in the cave before. Gil wondered why the creature was naked. Gil introduced himself, and the creature only turned its back on the prince. The creature went to the fish and began to eat. Rihanna decided to fry some more fish. Without understanding the nature of the undressed monster, Gil decided that the first step was to dress the monster. The next day, Gil used the power of design to dig up 41 goblin rooms. Gil tamed everyone in the Belden tribe. The island became even busier. The bad news was that the ship didn't have much supplies. Everyone is very busy producing basic necessities. After Gil finished building the rooms, Rihanna brought Gil a drink. From the color and smell, Gil guessed it was grape juice. The grape plantation will grow every year and there will be more fruits. Gil's faith in Rihanna was unquenchable. The creature that was encountered earlier was named Mappa. Map was staring at the working goblin, which made the other one angry. Map was looking at the goblin-made knives. The goblin also swore at Map, saying that Map underestimated the goblin's work. Map was not at a loss, picked up the tools and began to forge. All of Map's movements were precise and fast. Everyone was very surprised. The weapon turned out to be elegant and beautiful. It was like a work of art, but in fact it was only a pickaxe. Gil decided to check out Map's work. After making a hit with Map's pickaxe and a regular one, everyone was convinced of Map's skill. No one could understand why tools made from the same material were so different. In the midst of all that had happened, Gil had forgotten about his Dragon Ball. However, by the time he remembered it, it was gone. No one saw or touched his balloon. Checking the spot where he'd left the ball, Gil noticed a pit that looked like Map's body. Gil guessed that the orb had resurrected Map. However, Gil was not upset, but rather glad that they had another companion. Thanks to this, Gil and the others were able to reconstruct the ship, enlarge the shore. They also started digging more and tamed new slugs that help with transportation. Everything is going great, but there is also bad news. Turtle stones are becoming less and less. Rihanna's life expectancy has increased by 10 years, but this is not enough. But Rihanna says otherwise. In fact, Gil wants Rihanna to live longer. Gil wants to dig more, develop the island, and live with Rihanna. That was how Gil discovered the cave. The cave was a room. Gil decided to take his things out of the room. He found a stone heart. By combining this gem with your inventory, you can create a doll. He also found the evolution stone. Gil decided to think about it later. Gil told Varys, Reen, Alvin, and Map about the stone. All goblins know the legends. One of them mentions the stone of evolution. Gil knows goblin-like species, hobgoblins and leaf goblins. All of them were once simple goblins, but based on external factors, they evolved. General Alvin is just a goblin born with such a body. The goblins thought that the evolution stone was just an invention. The goblins wanted to test this stone after hearing about its ability. Alvin didn't want to change his body. Rihanna wanted to help Gil, but she didn't think she was worthy of using the evolution stone. Varys and Alvin supported the idea. Gil was also in favor of the idea. However, he wanted Rihanna to live as long as possible. After these words, Rihanna finally decided to evolve. So they decided. Rihanna picked up the stone. Rihanna wanted to be with Mr. Gil for a very long time. A bright light came from it. Then the lights went out. Everyone looked at Rihanna. Rihanna's appearance had changed, and her clothes were gone. Everyone was surprised. Gil awoke, puzzled. He realized that Rihanna had evolved and could now use magic. Rihanna was standing next to Gil. She was waiting for him to wake up. The next thing he knew, he was lying on her lap, and he was embarrassed. Gil drew back, which surprised Rihanna. After passing out, Gil needed to lie down and rest, but he insisted that this was due to fatigue. Gil asked him how long he'd been asleep and asked about Map's business. It was still night in the courtyard, and Map was resting in a corner of the room. Gil asked about Rihanna's business, surprised that she looked just like a human. After a moment of silence, Rihanna confessed that she didn't like her past self at all. She told me about her curse, her sister's taunts, her parents' help, and later, their disappointment in her. It was because of this that Rihanna wanted to be beautiful when using the evolution stone. After this confession, Rihanna immediately apologized to Gil for her selfish act in using the evolution stone. Hill was confused, but reassured Rihanna because during his stay on the skeleton, Hill also changed. And getting a new life is great. And if Rihanna evolved without getting the desired body, it would be a waste of time. Rihanna thanked Hill for her body, her life, and her name. She grabbed Hill's arm, offering him everything she had. Gil was embarrassed and took her hands in his other. Then Map woke up. Hill was surprised. Obviously, the Belden tribe was also shocked by Rihanna's evolution. Rihanna presented her dress to everyone, asking for their opinion on it. Elvin and Varys saw the evolution take place, but many people could not believe that it happened so suddenly and spontaneously. But after seeing Rihanna's hard work, they realized that it really was her. Rihanna also devoted herself to studying martial arts and magic. It seemed that her abilities were limitless. She was good at everything. Hill was admiring Rihanna when Varys' voice came from behind him. Gil immediately started making excuses for not looking at Rihanna's feet. Varys believed Hill with a grin, but soon told him about the crest on Rihanna's leg. Hill was surprised, not knowing that goblins also had crests. He, like everyone else in his kingdom, thought that only humans had crests. Rather, Hill had never even thought about it. Varys showed him his coat of arms. It was the King of Witchcraft. Hill was very surprised, because the King of Witchcraft is an incredible coat of arms. Only one of his brothers has it. This coat of arms allows you to use and show your magical powers to the maximum. Varys agreed with him, but he felt that such a crest was useless to him because he couldn't use magic. Still, he was happy with it, because it was precisely because of this that he wasn't fixated on the power of the crest and was able to develop without it. It was about Varys' plan. A plan to reclaim land from the sea to expand the island. Expand the area to increase the harvest and create a place for children to play. Hill and Varys began discussing ways to increase their territory. Hill started using raw materials from the workshop outside the cave. After obtaining gravel from stone and sand, using stone blocks, spider mud, and water magic, Hill managed to greatly increase the island's territory, thus completing his goal. But Hill didn't stop there. The goblin children and Map ran across the new land, thanks to Hila. Rihanna also thanked him for his excellent work. Suddenly, Map was attacked by an unknown creature. At first, this creature could not be identified, as everything happened very quickly. But when the monster was in free flight over the inhabitants of the island of Sheol Reef, they realized that it was a killer bird. The goblins began to run away, heading back to the cave to escape from a dangerous monster, namely the killer bird. One of the little goblins fell and was attacked by one of the birds. Someone cut off her head with an axe as they walked, and it was Elvin. Elvin began to kill the killer birds one by one, and later Hill joined him. Suddenly they heard another voice, Rihanna's. She protected the inhabitants of the island with magic shields. They didn't know which of the birds had swallowed Map, so they only aimed for the heads to avoid hitting their dwarf friend. Goblins provided moral support to the rescuers from the cave. Alvin, Gil, and Rihanna were defending the cave entrance. Hill created a large-sized golem doll. One bird dropped a map out of its mouth, and Elvin began randomly killing all the birds in its path. Elvin used spider silk ropes to strangle monsters. The spider thread was very strong. Hill used blizzard magic and chased the birds out of the sky. Elvin admired his boss's skill. Rihanna was worried about Hila. Gil looked confused and began to tremble with fright. This was the first time he had actually fought monsters in a fair fight. The goblins began to rejoice at Hill's victory. Fending off the killer birds is quite difficult. Gil felt a surge of joy. Even someone like him can become a true ruler. The goblins started discussing dishes that could be made from the meat of the killer bird. The goblins cut the killer bird into small pieces. They washed it, fried it, and made soup out of some of the meat. Alvin was thanking Boss Heel for that, as always. They all sat down to eat together. Very rarely did they eat meat. After fighting off the killer birds, they made a feast. Heel had never tasted monster meat before, but the smell and appearance were impressive. Hill really liked the monster bird meat. Rihanna made a very delicious soup and steak. Killer bird meat has different flavors depending on the body part of the bird. The meat may taste like chicken, beef, or pork. Despite the danger of the bird, this monster can be a good source of food. They decided to put the golem on guard, as the birds don't attack those who are bigger than them. In addition to the golem, Varys suggested assembling a guard unit and building walls with watchtowers. Fu ate the meat with her hands. Hill was surprised by the girl's appearance at first, but he recognized her as Al's daughter. Fu was given the name Ful. Ful was interested in the cause of Heel's power. Hill explained that it was all thanks to the magic stones. Ful was very interested and asked if she could dig too. Rihanna informed Ful that she had to evolve first. Ful was going to evolve. However, there was no evolution stone. Ful is always interested in getting stronger. Ful could start digging and find the evolution stone. Ful raced off to dig. The more people who can use magic, the better. Heel used 500 magic stones on Rihanna to increase her magic power. Rihanna ate well to get stronger. They finished land reclamation and celebrated Thanksgiving. It was the first memorable day on the island of Sheol Reef. Rihanna came up with the idea of creating a refrigerator. Thus, they came up with a refrigerator for storing a large number of products. After checking the refrigerator temperature, everyone went out. The meat won't go bad anymore. The blacksmith shop has been updated. Rihanna used the power of freezing to maintain the cold. Rihanna became more confident in herself. Elvin and Varys are working on the outer harrow. Everything is going well. Hill didn't know about mines, which was surprising for someone who was called the King of Caves. They extracted coal, which resulted in the release of harmful gas. I needed ventilation. This gas can be poisoned or explode from its excessive accumulation. Map could have built a device to supply air from the outside. Ful has been working since childhood and knows a lot about mines. Ful has the coat of arms of the miner. Ful is very efficient and experienced, and her intuition is amazing. During the dig, Ful asked about Gil's father. Hill is afraid of his father and brothers. All of his acquired power couldn't compare to his father's limitless power. Ful wants to become stronger than his father by any means necessary. Ful noticed something and went to it. Hill followed her. They saw a huge room, similar to the one where Heel had once found the evolution stone. The statues seemed strange to Hill. He stopped Ful, who was getting closer to the statues. The statues started moving and wanted to attack Ful. However, Heel managed to use defensive magic. After making sure that Ful was okay, Heel began to think about what had happened. It was a golem, but the golem created by Hill couldn't use magic. These statues even had swords. 4 golems surrounded Heel. Heel prepared to defend himself. Heel deflected the attack and felled the golems with wind magic. The golems shrank back. Ful was fine. Shell informed everyone of what had happened. Everyone stopped mining. Ful brought Hill a stone, hoping it was an evolution stone. However, it was a sorcerer's stone that could store magic. It could also be used to create dolls. Ful was upset. Map approached Ful with an intimidating look, startling the girl. Map took the sword. No one knew what he was doing, but he looked happy. The clothes, or lack of them, still bothered Ful. Ful and Heel wanted to take the sword, but they didn't have the strength to lift it. Heel could only collect minerals and loot items. The prince tried to break the sword with a pickaxe, but failed. After continuing his attempts, Heel was still able to destroy the sword. Even Map's ice pick barely managed the task. The mark informed Heel that they had found orichalcum lighter and stronger than metal, can enchant magic effects. Many people think that this is just a legend. Meanwhile, Alvin was loudly doing something. Gil asked what Alvin was doing. Alvin was trying to pick up the sword Map had brought. This sword was made from 400 orichalcum ingots. Ful had told her father that it was impossible to lift a sword. But this did not stop Alvin, and in a matter of seconds the general was able to raise his sword. Everyone rejoiced. Elvin has the Great Warrior Cross. But after a while, the sword fell to the ground, followed by General Elvin. Everyone was taken aback and ran up to the warrior. Heel used healing magic. Ful ran to her father and hugged him tightly in the stomach area. Ful was very angry with her father because she was worried about him. Alvin was apologizing to his daughter. Map, meanwhile, continued to make swords. Dwarves do amazing things using rare materials. They combine their skills accumulated by the heads with mysterious techniques and spirit. Map presented the weapon to Hill. Surprisingly, the pickaxe was light. Amazing orichalcum ice pick. After that, Map made all kinds of guns out of orichalcum. Undoubtedly, he is a genius. The goblins were diligently trying to destroy something. Even the axe didn't help. Elvin was mentally prepared to face the monster. At the time, Full and Heel were enjoying the success of ventilation. The air is much cleaner now. This is also due to the rotating blades of Map. Full and Heel wanted to get back to the dig. No one knows where or when they might encounter something dangerous. Full went to the blacksmith shop. For safe mining, Heel decided to create new security golems. While Heel worked on creating golems, Map created weapons for them. Heel was going to make the golems much harder and stronger. Heel got very carried away and began to think through all the functions of the golem. Suddenly, Gil saw Rihanna standing behind him and was surprised. Rihanna asked Hila to come with her. Rihanna assured him that Hill would like it. They came to their destination. They arrived at the garden. The garden was full of apples, lemons, palm trees, and grapes. Gil praised Rihanna for her hard work. Rihanna had an idea. Using her power, Rihanna hit the palm tree. Fruit began to fall from the palm tree. While still in flight, the fruit was cut in two by Rihanna's power. Rihanna landed neatly and picked up 2 coconut halves. Rihanna mixed lemon and coconut juice with water. Now the taste of the drink will be moderate. Rihanna learned martial arts from Elvin. The drink was very tasty. It had a sweet aroma and hints of sourness. General Elvin was walking with a shell. Gil was interested in her. It was a satanic shell that Alvin had found on the edge of the island. The shell of the shell is very strong. It was easy for the general to get this shell. Varys was taking liquid out of a satanic shell. Hill asked, "What is this liquid?" Varys said that depending on the treatment, this liquid can become a strong poison. Everyone was scared, but it was a joke. As it turned out, the satanic shell could be used to make Tyrian purple paint. During all this time, Heel met a huge number of monsters. To protect his domain, Heel created 14 new golems. 9 of them have magical powers. Hill encountered a problem. There were satanic shells in part of the unfinished wall. There were a lot of them, more than 50. Varys was well versed in seashells, so he knew their weakness. Despite their ability to withstand heat and cold, they couldn't resist lightning. Hill decided to handle it all by himself. However, Rihanna's help was not superfluous. Rihanna and Hill rode forward on their golems. 2 defense golems were clearing the path of seashells. Rihanna was currently killing seashells with lightning magic. Everyone was very surprised. In this way, the golems and Rihanna quickly got rid of the shells. The golems did not allow the seashells to reach Hila and Rihanna with their liquid. It should have been over quickly. And so it was. The golems and Rihanna did very well. Hill decided to put the meat in the refrigerator faster. However, a couple of seashells gathered their strength and stood up. The seashells spilled their liquid. Rihanna closed behind Hill. Hill was taken aback to realize that Rihanna had sacrificed herself. Rihanna was lying on top of him, covered in slime. Her body was numb, unable to move. Hill healed her and Rihanna was able to stand up. Gil started to run to get water for Rihanna. Gil and Rihanna noticed a pearl inside the satanic shell. This is very unusual. The pearl was beautiful. Gil gave the pearl to Rihanna. Gil thought the pearl suited Rihanna. Rihanna was embarrassed. Rihanna returned the pearl to Hill and ran away. Gil realized that he couldn't just give the pearl to her. The next day, Hill was digging again. He decided to take a break. Full, meanwhile, continued to dig. With a reminder of the food, Gil left. Thanks to the golems, they were able to continue mining. They ate dishes made from the meat of satanic shells. There was a lot of food, so everyone ate to the brim. Their nests were nearby, so they attacked not infrequently. Meat was enough for a long time, as well as materials. The currents of Sheol Reef were unusual. They were more than a blessing. Varys showed Zil the Tyrian purple. This fabric was better than the one used by the nobles. They decided to use this fabric to make clothes. Then Elvin came in. Varys and Hill wanted to show the general the cloth, but Elvin was in a bad mood. Elvin asked Hela to go with him to the reclaimed lands. Gil followed Alvin. Alvin showed Hill the orc. Everyone was very surprised. The orc was caught on an embankment and dragged to Hill. The orc had a seal. This seal was the banner of the tribe that destroyed the Belden clan. One of the goblins started shouting that it was just a corpse. All the goblins began to approach and strike at the dead body of the orc, taking revenge on him. Gil started to stop them. Turning to Varys and Elvin, Hill received no support in return. Hill knew he couldn't stop the goblins. However, the princess gave the order to stop. The princess stood confidently and looked at the goblins. Kicking the dead is a disgrace. The princess insisted that the Belden tribe should preserve its pride. The goblins wanted to object, but the princess' words were the law. The goblins began to convince the princess that the orcs were terrible. The princess did not give in to the goblins and insisted on her own way. Rhianna also added that only Gil decides what to do with the bodies on the island. The princess bowed to Hill and begged his pardon. Gil was grateful to Rhianna for stopping the goblins. Hill moved toward the orc's body. Hill began her monologue confidently. Hill has made it clear to others that he does not intend to tolerate such behavior. Hill wouldn't let anyone mock a dead man. Gil bowed from the waist down and asked to hear his request. Everyone was taken aback, asking their boss to raise their head. Hill also asked Varys to take care of the orc's funeral. As it turned out, there were more orc bodies. In total, they pulled out 24 bodies. It wasn't just the bodies of orcs. There were also the bodies of kobolds, which are also the worst enemies of goblins. Gil and Varys began to speculate about how they had come to be in such a remote region. All the bodies had wounds, but some of them were badly injured. The wounds were inflicted with an axe, a sword, or maybe even fangs. But the size of the wounds was impressive. There were also corpses half blown away by the intense heat, at first glance. It all led to the fact that the kobolds and orcs were attacked by someone else. Putting their thoughts aside, they decided to take care of the armed ships. Varys handled the corpses, and Elvin handled the defense. Hill and Rhianna started looking for things they might need in the future. Everything was in a terrible state. Gil heard a sound and thought it was Rhianna, but it wasn't her. The sound came from the chest. They wanted to open it, but they couldn't. There was a lock on the chest. Hill used his magic to open the chest. From the chest with incredible speed. Hill wasn't sure, but he believed Map's words. Hill used fire magic. Everything began to smoke. The shield deflected the attack. The Orichalcum shield became even more effective with defensive magic. Varys and Elvin were engaged in defense. Mappa's project was great. Thanks to Map's genius, the island can be protected from giant monsters. Gil thought of the Leviathan, the mythical creature. Alvin didn't believe it. However, a group of Queen Alcmaine's soldiers were destroyed by a certain monster. At the same time, Reel found himself on a high pole. Reel was stuck on it, and Alvin didn't know what to do. Alvin decided to go to Reel's aid and started climbing the pole. Halfway down Alvin's path, Reel jumped off a pole. Alvin fell, and everyone became agitated. At that time, Rhianna ran over and took Reel. Elvin was fine. In the field, Reel dug up all the seeds and also ate the goblins' breakfasts. Kobold children are very energetic. Hill showed Varys the seed, hoping Varys knew about it. However, to his regret, Varys had never seen this seed before. Rhianna said the name of this seed is Yggdrasil. Varys and Hill were surprised. Rhianna was also surprised. I didn't know why she said that. It's all thanks to the farmer's coat of arms. Varys knew about Yggdrasil. It is a giant tree that blesses all living things. However, this is only a legend. Now the legends can be believed. The evolution stone was also an old fairy tale. Hill had finished his dig. Gil broke through the cave. The cave now has a tunnel leading to the other end of the island. Terran's children helped Hela bring the soil outside. Heel had enough materials to build it. Heel had done something like this before, so he wasn't worried. In one day, they finished cultivating the new land. Here they decided to plant the seed of Yggdrasil. On the same land, Rihanna planted seeds from her hometown for beauty. Map was sleeping nearby. Rihanna noticed that the seed was growing very fast and informed Hill about it. Rihanna hadn't used the sunstone yet. Map also didn't do anything. Gil said to use the sunstone. Rihanna pulled out the sunstone and used it. The tree began to grow at an incredible rate. The tree did not stop and grew further and higher. With just a single stone, the tree grew so fast, causing them to be at a loss. Everything was fine until the tree grew to such an extent that there was not enough space. They began to run. Mapu was captured by a tree. Rihanna, Hill, Shell, and Reel could only run on. Suddenly, everyone looked up and was very surprised. The Yggdrasil tree was huge. It covered the entire area of newly cultivated land. After Yggdrasil stopped growing, Rihanna and Hilo went to rescue Map. Rihanna pointed to the place that had swallowed up Map. Shelu was given the order to summon Varys. The tree was more like a mountain in size. Only Map's head was visible from the outside. Map felt good. The dwarf wasn't even worried. Rihanna and Hill continued to think about how to save their comrade. Rihanna pointed to the smell. The smell of the forest was beautiful. Rihanna and Hill felt the magic power inside the tree. The flow of Yggdrasil's magic was similar to Saint-type magic. Help has arrived. Hill wanted to ask Varys to explore the tree. Reel barked from afar. It was dangerous to walk around alone, so Heel sent Reel back. The forest is Reel's home. Most likely, Reel is homesick. Gil agreed with Rihanna. Reel ran over to Hill happily. The three of them studied the area, running, jumping. As they ascended, they were able to see a beautiful view. The island was beautiful from this height. There were no ships on the horizon. The kingdom of Sanfaris had completely forgotten about its 17th prince. Rihanna asked Hilu how he came to be on the island of Sheol Reef. Hill froze. Rihanna apologized. Gil decided to tell Rihanna his story. Rihanna sat listening intently to Hill. Hill told his story to Rihanna. Hill had been banished from the kingdom because he was useless. Rihanna contradicted him, saying that he was not useless at all and did not believe in this nonsense. Hill continued his story. He added that he had never been concerned about ruling the capital. Gil often ran away from the castle. I ran off to the old servants' quarters. At this time, he was always reading books. Everyone treated Hill very badly. They respect him on the island. One day, he heard a noise while reading. As he approached, he saw the demon. Gil was surprised by the demon in the capital. The demon wanted to attack, but it was chained down. Hill immediately realized that the demons were being bullied. The prince decided to try recovery magic to help the demon. Prince Gil named the demon Lopez. Every day, Gil brought Lopez food. Hill tried to pick the lock by reading the spellbook. It didn't work out for him. For Hill, the time spent with Lopez was the best. Hill was willing to hire people to get Lopez released. The prince gave Lopez promises of freedom. Suddenly people began to approach Lipos and Hill. Lopez took a quick step back. Leading the way was an extremely handsome man. It turned out to be Hila's younger brother, the 18th Prince Oren. Lopez tries to escape. Oren struck out, thinking it was fun. The nobles began their training. Lopez carefully dodges the students' punches. They only planned to injure Lopez. When he was already lying on the ground, unable to stand up or even move, they left. It was hard for Hill to watch. Hill ran up to Lopez and begged for his forgiveness. Hill nursed him, but the healing magic didn't work on Lopez. Every day, Oren and his buddies would come back and beat up Lopez again. Hill broke down. If it doesn't stop, they'll kill him. Oren was surprised to see his brother standing in front of Lopez. Gil asked me to leave Lopez alone. Oren slapped Hill and convicted him of spying and protecting a demon. Oren started threatening Hill with his life, and Hill was even more afraid for the demon. Gil begged Oren on his knees, head bowed. Oren gave Lopez to Hill, with the condition that he would remove the collar from Lopez and leave the kingdom in 10 seconds. Hill couldn't get the collar off him. Hill tried his best, but time was up. Lopez died. Hill attacked Oren from behind, but Oren had a shield. Filled with anger, Oren looked at Heel with disdain. He thought he was weak. He woke up in the hospital. Then he was exiled to the land of Sheol Rif. That was the end of Heel's story. Heel kept his friend's ashes because he couldn't leave them behind. Heel blamed himself for his friend's death. Rihanna didn't change her mind after hearing Heela's story, saying that Heela wasn't useless or worthless at all. Lopez, Reel, the goblins, and everyone else always get help from Heel. Rihanna began to cry. Gil was flustered and handed Rihanna a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. The princess calmed down. They continued on their way. They came to a beautiful place covered with flowers. Among the many flowers were those that grew in Rihanna's native land. Perhaps they were planted by a native of the Belden tribe. Reel had a lot of fun, running around and playing on the field. Rihanna added a comment about Heela's story. She reminded Hill that now, if Hill was in trouble, everyone would help him. Since then, Hill is not alone. He has friends. For Heel, those words were important. He thanked Rihanna. After studying the tree, Varys learned that its leaves make good tea and ointment, and also comes out a good juice. However, a large amount may give you a headache. The branches of the tree are light and strong, almost like an orichalcum. Cuttings for pickaxes were made from the branches. Most likely, these branches have the effect of reducing fatigue. Looking at the flowering of the tree, I want to believe in the best. Life on the island is getting better and better every day. One day, Hill noticed that something was wrong with Reel. Reel started to cry. Everyone gathered at the sound of Reel's crying. Hill assumed it was just a nightmare. However, Hill noticed an unusual phenomenon. Reel's eye was different. Everyone in the room saw the vision. A brave woman confronted the monster. Using magic, she defended herself and then boldly went straight to the monster. The vision ended. Everyone suddenly felt sick. Everyone in the room saw it. Everyone realized that the monster was Leviathan. Varys determined that it was a clairvoyant mark. Varys is not familiar with this ability. It is called the Eye of God. What they saw was the power of clairvoyance. Reel showed me what happened to his mother. The vision was seen by all the inhabitants of the island, after which everyone began to fear Leviathan. The goblins were worried about Leviathan attacking Sheol Reef. Heel understood the gravity and danger of the situation. Leviathan is not a simple monster. It was important for Hill to protect everyone. At that moment, Elvin spoke loudly to everyone. Elvin reminded all the residents of what they had been through. Alvin raised everyone's spirits, including Helis. Rihanna and Varys looked proudly at Alvin. Heel collected his thoughts and reassured the crowd. If they all unite, they will be able to resist Leviathan. It is only necessary to prepare for battle. By lending power to Hill, defeating the monster will be possible. After that, Hill, Varys, Rihanna, Elvin, Map, Full, and Shell gathered to discuss what had happened. Heel was very worried about the upcoming fight, especially after the vision. Heel realized that his magic on Leviathan wasn't going to work. Gil turned to Map. Map was also unsure of his weapons. Even an orichalcum weapon wouldn't be able to injure a monster. The best solution was to hide from Leviathan. The huge body of the monster is unlikely to be able to reach deep into the cave. The hall where Heel had once found the golems would have been a good place to hide. In addition, they could build a refrigerator. Elvin came up with the idea that Leviathan could sink to the bottom of the island if it attacked, and the best solution is to leave the island. But Hill said he had a plan. Gil was standing in front of a huge cave with an icebreaker in his hand. The moment of truth has arrived. Hill wanted to get new materials. The deeper they go, the more new content they find. Maybe they'll find something that can kill Leviathan. This is just Hila's thinking. Varys and Rihanna supported Hill. Reel could help with his abilities, but Mr. can't fully control his powers. Still, Reel could help them. Reel made himself comfortable in Gil's backpack. Reel fell asleep. They continued to dig further. Thus, the inhabitants of the island became closer to each other in order to build a defense against Leviathan. Thanks to Yggdrasil, the tree was very plentiful. Therefore, the construction progressed very well and quickly. Hill is waiting for news from Reel. He's been gloomy lately, but his visions allow Hyla to see what's behind the rocks. Sometimes the reel finds something on its own, but in any case, it is very useful. So a few weeks passed. Reel actively began to dig in one place. Heel and Full noticed this and started digging in the same spot. Hill didn't see anything there, but he decided to dig. At breakneck speed, Hill began to dig. Digging deeper, Heel found a huge armored golem. Full was surprised, and so was Hill. The golem didn't have a core, but it was made of orichalcum. They found a silver sword nearby. He was beautiful, but also scary. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break the sword. Map became interested in this sword and approached Hill. Map was shocked by what he saw. Map began to behave strangely. Namely, he began to bow to the sword. He's never been seen this active before. Map was going to work on the sword. Using all the devices, Map began to create. Hill and Rihanna were still standing there in disbelief at Map's behavior. The furnace temperature had to be raised, since the melting point of the sword is higher than what it is now. Hill and Rihanna joined hands and filled the furnace with their magic. Using flame magic, the temperature in the furnace rose greatly. The sword was melted down. They got mithril. Mithril is a material that can kill gods. Everyone was very happy. Map made a great weapon out of mithril. Residents have completed the construction of a defensive wall. It was more like a fortress. All the residents trained hard and thought out many options for the battle. No one wanted to be a burden to the new clan. So they prepared for the first battle of Sheol. Gil noticed Alvin alone with Reel and Shell. He started to approach, but Rihanna stopped him. From a distance, Heel could see Alvin apologizing for insulting Reel's mother. So Reel and Elvin's relationship became Lucci, or so Elvin thought. They were determined to avenge Reel's mother. Reel sweetly and innocently threw a punch at Alvin. Now everyone who will fight in the battle can rely on themselves. The goblin was banging the bell, signaling that something important was happening. 2 ships were approaching the island. Gil tried to see the ship's banner through Map's telescope. The emblem belonged to the orcs who attacked the Belden tribe. Elvin was angry at the thought of the orcs trying to attack the island. As they watched from behind the walls, they noticed that the ships were attacking someone in the water. Reel showed the vision again. The water gives off a huge amount of magic power. All this is due to a strong monster that is underwater. Everyone panicked. The monster's long neck poked out from under the water. A terrifying scream was heard. The orc ship fired rocks from its cannons to try to get a hold of the monster, but nothing worked. The monster was invulnerable. The people of Sheol Reef Island just watched, excited and worried. Leviathan was attacked by a ship. Elvin entered the bell. As everyone turned their attention to him, Elvin shouted for everyone to prepare for battle, as the Leviathan would be arriving soon. Everyone had the same goal to kill the monster. The villagers began to prepare for battle. Full ran to evacuate everyone to the cave. Full was worried about everyone. The goblins prepared their ballistae. One of the main weapons was brought into action. The ballista arrow was made of mithril. He had to stab the monster. The goblin aimed the arrow for a long time to hit the bullseye directly. And now, the moment of truth has arrived. Launch. The arrow flew with great speed towards the Leviathan. The monster saw the arrow and dodged it. This caused everyone to panic. Indeed, this was surprising, since the Leviathan's body was huge, and he was not particularly resourceful. Elvin decided to try again. Leviathan dodged Wednesday, knowing that the arrow could hurt him badly. This news pleased the inhabitants of the island. After that, Leviathan headed for the island of Sheol Reef. Everyone was taken aback and hurried to load another shell. Heel decided to apprehend Leviathan along with the golems. Heel used wind magic and created an incredible gust of wind called a megamethyl. The magic didn't affect Leviathan in any way. He was getting closer. It was decided to freeze the water next to the monster so that it could not move. The monster began to attack, so Heel hurriedly ordered the golems to activate their shields to block the attack. Leviathan's magic is incredible. Heel couldn't resist the monster's magic for long. The golem collapsed in the process. The Leviathan's attack stopped and the monster continued its approach. The ballista was almost ready. The distance was small, so everyone hoped that the monster wouldn't be able to dodge the attack this time. The arrow was fired. Everyone was waiting for the result, and the arrow went straight into Leviathan's chest. It's all thanks to Rihanna's magic. Rihanna cast invisibility magic on the arrow. But that wasn't the end of it. An arrow flew at the monster, which engulfed it. The arrow was attached to a rope made of spider thread and a steel cable. 5 more such arrows flew at the Leviathan. Now he couldn't move. However, even that couldn't stop the monster. Gears were breaking. There wasn't much time. Another arrow was ready to be fired. Now they were aiming for the head to finally kill the creature. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. Sea pursuers began to appear on the horizon. They are parasitic on large marine life. This time, they hit on Leviathan. The archers began to shoot down the parasites. Sea pursuers could also climb the walls. Now all the forces were focused on destroying the parasites. At that time, long, large horns appeared on the back of the Leviathan. These horns turned into arrows and headed straight for the island of Sheol Reef. Everyone was told to hide behind the shield that Hela and Rihanna had created. Surprisingly, they persevered and thought that everything was over. This was far from the case. Leviathan destroyed the fortress of the island of Sheol Reef with his tail in one blow. Evacuated residents became very worried when they heard a noise from above. In addition to the noise, stones began to fall from the ceiling. This wasn't a good sign for them. Adults and wise people, mothers, began to reassure their children, assuring them that everything would be fine, saying that it would all be over soon. The children were very worried that their house would be destroyed again. However, everyone believed in Heel and his companions. At the very least, everyone was pinning their hopes on them. Leviathan's kick sent Heel flying. Shell caught Heel just in time to prevent him from hurting himself badly. Realizing the danger, Heel stood up and went to defend his comrades again. He used all the golems to create a decent shield. It was like he was alone on the field. Everything around him was in ruins. There was just rubble all around. None of his companions responded to Heel's call, which caused the prince to start panicking. In parallel, it was attacked by sea pursuers. Using his magic, Heel barely managed to fight back. However, he knew that his strength was weakening. Now you can give up. The only thing he could do was save the others, so Heel told Shell to run. But then Rihanna came to the rescue. Rihanna skillfully fended off the monsters, showing off her skills. The princess came to the prince's defense and confidently said that she would not allow a finger to touch Heel. Rihanna and Hela were very happy to see each other alive and in one piece. However, the fight wasn't over yet. At that moment, everyone else arrived to help. The only and new goal is to protect Heel. With renewed vigor, everyone went into battle. They were a little late, but nothing terrible happened during this time, so they continued the fight. At the same time, Leviathan was attacking the island. The monster broke News Golem in one hit. Suddenly Hill started talking about a plan. Rihanna said that he was very dangerous and objected to Hill. However, this was the only chance. Rihanna took Hela's hand. She gave him her mana. Heel had to win at all costs. Leviathan was preparing to strike again. He started collecting magic. Leviathan was distracted by the fact that Heel was getting close to the monster. Gil drew Leviathan's attention to him and began to run. He sat on Terran and told the spider to run faster. All Varys, Alvin, and Rihanna could do at that moment was trust in their comrade. But Alvin wasn't just going to stand there. Alvin prepared to launch the ballista. Varys pointed out that the winch was broken and that it would not be possible to pull the bowstring. But even that didn't stop Alvin. He felt indebted to Hill, and he couldn't stand idly by in this situation. Map backed him up. At the same time, Hill and Terran were running away from Leviathan. Orc bullets flew at the monster in parallel. Alvin launched an arrow and hit him squarely in the eye. Leviathan has become more vulnerable, which means it's time for the final stage of the plan. Heel signaled full. It destroyed the stone cliff. The rocks of that cliff flew straight at that monster's head. The monster fell into the water and deeper. As it turned out, they prepared and dug a cave. With only the supporting pillars demolished, the Leviathan fell into the pit. Now the monster was alone in there. Next, Heel picked up a mithril pickaxe. Heel dug again and again to get to the monster and kill it. Suddenly, there was a crack. This was the result of successfully sticking a pickaxe into the Leviathan's forehead. Heel had hit the nail on the head. Everyone was very surprised by what happened. Heel hit Leviathan. The legendary monster from fairy tales was defeated. Heel didn't believe it, but looking at the reaction of the others, he also began to rejoice and smile at his success. However, it was still too early to be happy. Leviathan wasn't completely defeated. The enraged monster snarled at the entire cave. From this cry, the sound of the cave began to collapse, which was the first time. In addition to the landslides, residents began to lose faith in victory, which greatly affected the overall spirit and strength of the team. The scream was so impressive that everyone covered their ears and thought it was the death cry of a Leviathan. At the same time, Heel was wrapped in a rope. Everyone became despondent, not knowing what to do or how to save the clan. Then the princess heroically jumped into the air, caught on Terran's web, and approached Hill. Rihanna made it a priority to save the prince. It was important for the prince to save Rihanna, so he told her to run, to leave him alone. However, Rihanna immediately rejected this absurdity. Rihanna had once promised that she would never leave Heel alone. No rocks obstructed Rihanna and Heela's path. And suddenly there was another creature in front of them. It hoisted Rihanna and Heela onto its back and made its way through all the obstacles to the exit. They were told not to be afraid of her. Rihanna and Hill were very interested in finding out who the creature really was. That's what they asked her. Heel defeated Leviathan, which means there is a hero among humans. So the creature said, "This creature is a kobold." The two kobolds were standing side by side. One of them smelled His Highness Woohill's scent. The kobolds were wondering if they and the Sheol Reef Islands had seen a box containing a small kobold. At that moment, Alvin and Varys came running to them. The kobolds greeted the goblins and shared their knowledge of the news. Varys explained more about these kobolds. They were Ash and Hain of the Tiberius tribe. They were assigned to guard Reel. Varys was familiar with the kobold queen. At that moment, Reel ran up to them, followed by Full. Ash and Hain addressed Reel as Your Highness. Everyone switched to Reel. The kobolds were happy to see Reel, but they were also ashamed that they couldn't save and protect Reel. Elvin asked why Ash and Hain had come to the island. Ash had told the truth. The boat Ash and Hain were on was sunk by Leviathan. After that, they lost track of Her Majesty, so they sailed on the sea. They would have sailed on, but they were saved by the orc pirates' cameo of the Horde of Corvus. Elvin expressed his bewilderment. Aren't kobolds and orcs at odds? Ash and Hain asked the people of the island to pardon the orcs, as the orc ship was badly damaged, and they had no ammunition left due to the shelling. They will be very easy to break. At that moment, Heel intervened, introducing himself as the head of the place. Then Camus, the leader of the Horde of Corvus, introduced himself and immediately expressed surprise that a non-human island was ruled by a human. Camus was very big even for an orc. Camus turned to Al, saying that the second one was big enough for a goblin. Elvin, as the head of the tribe, decided to help the orcs. However, he added that he does not intend to forget old grievances. At that moment, Camus smiled and decided that this was fate. Camus was begging for the salvation of his comrades in exchange for his life. Everyone was surprised. Camus continued. He took full responsibility for what had happened to the Belden tribe. He was willing to give his life if only they would allow the ship to be repaired. Elvin accepted Camus' plea and decided that Camus would end his life as the leader of the orcs. One of the orcs stepped forward and contradicted Camus' words, saying that it wasn't the leader's fault. The orc continued, saying that it was all the traitor's fault. Camus, on the other hand, told the orc to be quiet so that it wouldn't embarrass him. The argument continued until Alvin called for silence. Gil asked me to tell you more about the traitors. Then the story began from the mouth of an orc. There was a deputy Captain Cloud in the tribe who was also a traitor. He waited until the leader left for the voyage, and when that happened, he stole part of the fleet. Cloud always wanted more power and fame. He had repeatedly said that Captain Camus' methods were too soft. Thanks to his eloquence, he lured many orcs to his side. As soon as Camus and his entourage found out about this, they started back, but it was too late. Cloud ran away, putting up flags everywhere. Cloud is behind all this, that was the answer. Then the unknown appearance of corpses near the shore became clear. Camus saved the kobolds. The horde of orcs never engaged in piracy. However, Camus still wished himself dead for not being able to control and settle all the issues in time. Alvin didn't change his mind that Camus deserved to die. Alvin finally asked what else Camus could add. Camus said it was funny to die at Alvin's hands. Alvin swung and raised his sword. Full was going to stop him. Everyone was surprised when Alvin stuck his sword in the ground. General Alvin told Camus to take the sword. Alvin challenged Camus to a duel. Everyone stood and stared at Alvin and Camus, not sure if they were really going to fight a duel. Everyone knows that Alvin is strong, but his opponent is also not a weakling, but a representative of the orcs himself. Heel wanted to at least cast a shield, but after looking at Rhianna's condition, he realized that leaving her would not be the best solution. Camus did not leave the question that he was ready to pay with his head for the death of the Belden tribe. However, Camus said that in a duel, he wouldn't let Alvin win so easily. Alvin wasn't going to back down. All the spectators were carefully and impatiently waiting for the duel to start. Alvin has an axe in his hand, and Camus has a sword in his hand. A legendary match was about to take place. Alvin was the first to attack. Camus defended himself. The next blow from Alvin knocked the opponent to the ground, but he quickly got up. Camus threw an axe blow that Alvin couldn't successfully dodge. Then came the blows to the living goblin. It was difficult for ordinary beings to understand what was going on in a duel, as the speed of combat was incredibly fast. The general skillfully dodged the orc's sword again, but the goblin's second attack caught him on the cheek. Camus is very fast and his attacks are difficult to predict. He's incredibly strong. Full began to worry. During the head-on attack, Alvin decided to turn the attack from the back. Camus noticed this dastardly trick and managed to bend down just in time. Now Alvin had to avoid both the axe and the sword. The goblin swerved away from the axe, and the sword, stuck in his hand, withdrew. Camus couldn't use the sword anymore. The orc does not admit defeat and continues the fight. Orcs will never lose to goblins. Camus decided to break General Alvin's arms. Everyone became agitated. Captain Camus could have broken the arms of any ordinary goblin, but Alvin was no ordinary warrior. Alvin is a great warrior of the Belden tribe. After gaining strength, Alvin threw Camus onto her back with all his strength. The orc was in shock. The goblin Alvin also broke Camus' sword. All the goblins cheered. Gil inquired about the condition of the orcs. He didn't know that orcs, and especially an orc leader, weren't easy to kill. Camus conceded defeat and offered to get it over with as soon as possible. The goblin picked up the axe and started walking towards Camus. Alvin came up and said only that he wasn't going to throw his life away. Camus' life now belongs to Alvin. The duel is over. The goblins won the war against the horde of Corvus. Alvin also apologized to Hill for his behavior. In response, Hill only thanked Alvin. The orcs were allowed to stay on the island until they could repair the ship. Camus accepted Gil's offer. Full came up to General Alvin. Full gave her father a hard kick. She kicked him in the leg. The goblin immediately screamed, not understanding why his daughter was doing this. After that, Full leaned on her father. Full reminded him of what she'd told him not to get so hot again. All the orcs agreed to obey Heel during their stay on the island of Sheol Reef. Thus, hundreds of warriors of the Horde of Corvus became guests of the once uninhabited Stone Island. Ash and Hain obeyed their queen's order. They began to love Hyla, as he is a virtue of Reel. Ash and Hain asked to be tamed, expecting new names from Heel. Now Heel has 2 more tamed beasts, and Ashton and Haines have been added. They swore on their lives that they would serve Hill. Varys is busy checking out the wounded and preparing places to live. Suddenly, Heel's health began to deteriorate. He denied it by saying that he was just tired. He checked the temperature with his hand, and Rhianna realized that Hela had a fever. Varys was left to take care of Hela. Despite his condition, Heel continued to work. Rihanna moved closer to Hill and wrapped her arms around his back. Gil was confused, not understanding what Rihanna was doing. The princess picked up Hill and carried him to the medical center. Hill handed over the command of the island to Varys. Once they found huge rocks that create an interesting landscape. Map took something out of the ground and started eating it. Varys and the other goblins didn't understand this action of Map's. After one bite, Map became very happy. They started freezing the cave. Now they have even more meat, as Leviathan meat can be eaten. The goblins noticed a huge golem in the sea and decided to pull it out. The orcs offered their help. They had boats, and orcs were also good swimmers in the water. The goblins accepted the help and asked the orcs to bind the golem. Befriending the Duldan tribe and the horde of Corvus isn't easy, but it's possible. The golem's core was intact thanks to orichalcum, which is the material that the golem is made of. Hill was still undergoing treatment. Rihanna took care of him. Rihanna forbade Hill even to eat for himself. Rihanna spoon-fed Hila herself. Hill was very grateful to Rihanna and Varys. Rihanna loved it. It wasn't a big deal for her, especially since she didn't come to see Hill often. The only thing that didn't sit well with Rihanna was that she was resting while everyone else was working. Gil could barely contain himself. He really wanted to keep digging. This is his favorite activity. The goblins were digging as usual, and suddenly the temperature started to rise. That didn't stop the goblins from digging. Thus, a hot spring was discovered on the territory of the cave. Summing up everything that happened, Hill was sent to a god-forsaken island. He saved a sinking ship, fought a powerful beast, and learned the true value of friendship. But now Hill was facing the greatest enemy he had ever faced. When they found the source, they immediately reported it to others and decided to check it out. Rihanna really liked the spring. It was the same in her homeland. At the same time, Hill was sitting in a corner, looking embarrassed. Hill couldn't wait to be allowed to start digging. He couldn't do it yet, so he practiced with a pickaxe in the room. Suddenly, guests entered the room, which surprised Hill and hit his hand with a pickaxe. Rihanna, taking care of Gil, forbids him to work. Hill was laid to rest. Constant. Gil apologized to Rihanna. Camus asked if Hill had been taught that girls should not be bullied. Hill deftly dodged the question. There were a lot of people in the ward. It turned out that Rihanna was taking a tour of the island. Camus reminded Rihanna of something. At the same time, Rihanna gave Hill a gift. It was Hila's clothes. If restored with the help of spider threads, so the quality of these clothes will be higher. The island is full of surprises. You have to be prepared for anything. Ash commented on the structure of the island of Sheol Reef. From the land side, the island looks small from the outside, but there are a lot of tunnels underground. The island is very well developed in blacksmithing. Camus expressed an interest in Yggdrasil that no one had ever seen before. Hill wants to make these lands even better and more livable. Hill is always open to criticism. Camus asked Gil to accept the orcs as residents of the island of Sheol Reef. Gil agreed and did not refuse Camus' request. From now on, the inhabitants of the island of Sheol Reef include orcs. The interaction of orcs with goblins does not leave much to be desired, but over time, everything will pass and be forgotten. That's what Captain Camus is hoping for. Hill also believes that in the near future, all their grievances will be forgotten. You can't always be hostile. Cam asked how man could create such a beautiful place. Gil briefly explained his story to the orc. Before the prince could finish, Foal came in with the news of trouble. Burning water fills the cave. Seeing the hot springs in the cave, everyone was dumbfounded. Hill felt much better. Now he can walk without any problems. Elvin really liked the hot spring. The water doesn't stop pouring. Previously, there was not so much water. The first thing Hill decided to do was make sure that the water wasn't dangerous to use. Map used to bathe with this water. Everyone was convinced that the water was safe, even though Varys had also bathed in the spring before. They decided to think about how to bring the water up. At first, they didn't understand how to do it. However, Map came up with a good idea. As soon as Map has a plan, he runs to the workshop, to the blacksmith shop, and fills up his imagination in reality. Everyone was busy creating iron pipes. Map improved golem hands at numbers 8 and 9. Golems can connect 2 pipes by fusing metal between them. A large-scale project to bring water to the surface through iron pipes has begun. Map also created a device to control the water supply, so residents will not waste water just like that. In addition, residents built a bathhouse on the surface. Gil really wanted to help everyone else, but Rihanna wouldn't let him do the hard work. A week later, they finally managed to bring the hot spring to the surface. The bathhouse turned out to be huge in size, but there was no water yet. The moment of truth has arrived. They turned on the device for pumping out water. Initially, nothing happened. Many have already given up, thinking that the work done was useless. However, after a while, the water poured out with an impressive flow. Everyone was happy. Everyone couldn't wait for the time when it was already possible to swim. Captain Camus nobly gave up his first spring bath to Elvin. With one kick from Elvin, Camus was thrown into the water. Now everyone could enjoy the hot spring. Before you go swimming, you need to wash up. These were the words of Elvin, pointing to Camus. Everyone enjoyed the hot springs. Water took away the exhaustion. Alvin had told Camus that building was a job for muscular orcs. In response, Camus was offended. While the orcs and goblins argued among themselves, the kobolds, namely Ashton and Haynes, watched their queen, telling her to ignore them. Heel also gets a kick out of it. According to him, the day promises to be interesting. Suddenly, Hill notices the women's hot springs. He was very embarrassed and indignant. Hill hurriedly asked Varys the reason why the baths weren't shared. Varys didn't understand why they had to be separated. Gil was even more stunned when Rhianna expressed a desire to wash his back. 2 sides were fighting in Hill's mind. However, both sides agreed on one thing. In the end, Heel didn't listen to any of them and just ran away, saying that he was dizzy. So Heel left them all. He wanted to go swimming with the others, but he was afraid it would be more like he was bullying her. So Heel went to the hot spring in the dungeon. The temperature of this water was beautiful. Gil was glad that there were hot springs on his property now. Once again, Heel recognized and acknowledged Map's genius. Rhianna found Hela. Gil asked what Rhianna was doing here. Rhianna simply couldn't leave Heel alone. Rhianna guessed that Gil wanted to enjoy the hot spring in silence. Rhianna wanted to keep Hill company, and he didn't mind. Rhianna pointed her finger at the ore that shone like stars in the night sky. Gil wanted to check his inventory, but Rhianna interrupted him. Angela had something important to say to Hill. Heel sensed something was amiss due to the atmosphere, but decided not to interfere ahead of time. Rhianna was very concerned about her tribe. She didn't know what to make of the orcs, even knowing they were innocent. But despite everything, Rhianna is happy that they all live and work together. This makes her genuinely happy. The past is hard to let go of, but you need to develop yourself. This is how the island develops. All races live together and share one island Shial Reef. Rhianna leaned on Hela's back. The princess thanked Heel. Gil was very nervous, asking Rhianna what she was doing. When there was no response, Gil turned around and realized that Rhianna was asleep. Sleeps very sweetly. All this time, she worked hard, helped everyone, and studied a lot. They sat there for a while longer. Gil thanked Rhianna again. After a while, Rhianna woke up, excusing herself and saying that she had fainted. Gil was glad that the princess was finally awake, as he couldn't have taken more hot water. With the help of the source, Heel fully recovered. Now he could dig, which he was very happy about. Full smiled at the tears in Heel's eyes. Camus also came to congratulate Heel on his recovery. Camus needed Heel. Construction work was underway on the island. In honor of the restoration, Camus gave Hill a gift. It was a certain scroll. Hill opened it and read the contents. This was the port's plan. Camus created it at Varys' request. Hill had once intended to trade with the outside world online, but he didn't have any ships yet. Camus was ready to give up his ship, which surprised Heel greatly. The bottom of this ship was broken, but it could be easily fixed. The plan was very well laid out, taking into account many details. Heel even compares this plan to a royal one. Hill is a man from the kingdom himself. He is the 17th prince of the kingdom of Sanfalis, who was disposed of by being sent to a distant island. This island is truly abandoned, so the kingdom and its clutches cannot reach Gil and its port. Hill the Joyful went to discuss the port plan with Varys and Elvin. Camus didn't like the design very much. Heel was using his powers again, and now we are not talking about magic powers, but about the abilities of the coat of arms. Heel could easily create a landscape that would suit everyone, and so it happened. Even Camus was surprised by Heel's abilities. Thus, in a matter of minutes, a beautiful harbor was built. Hill said he could only lay the groundwork, and he wanted to hand over the management to Camus. Camus hesitated for a long time, unsure of his abilities. But Rhienna and Varys assured him that everything would be fine. Thus, Camus became responsible for the port that Hill had built. Helpers will be golems. Heel restored the golems that Leviathan had destroyed earlier. They went straight to work. A lot of stone was needed to build the port, so Heel continued to dig, thereby extracting materials. Full was glad to see Heel back. Heel didn't use a mithril pickaxe, just a normal one. Ashton and Haynes kept their eyes on Reel. There were a lot of dangerous and dirty places in the mine that Reel didn't want to go and play in. Haynes decided to try digging. Haynes was given a pickaxe. Full taught Haynes how to dig properly. She told me about the glowing places and how to use the pickaxe. Haynes is very strong, so he quickly dug to the bottom. Now Full and Haynes were competing, and neither of them was far behind. Heel was still enjoying his recovery and the fact that he could now dig. Reel walked over to Haynes. Haynes said he had to work. Haynes really enjoyed digging. Fuller agreed with him. In addition to hobbies, there is also a lot of ore. Suddenly, Haynes and Full called Heel to them, saying that they had found something unknown. Hill guessed it was a chest. It was made of orichalcum. Full had assumed it was a coffin, but Haynes had no idea what it was. Stones fell out of the capsule. They were transfer stones. They carry a person to other transfer stones. Gil knew what the stone was, but he wasn't sure what it would do. There was a hole in the capsule. Full saw him. This hole was shaped like a rock, and they decided to try to insert it there. The stone fit perfectly. Suddenly, a light appeared. A certain portal was activated, but they didn't know what to do. Full wondered where the portal led, but no one knew the answer to that question. Haynes suggested not testing this portal. However, Map walked over and went inside the portal. Haynes, Full, and Heel didn't even notice it at first, as they were too busy talking. They were thinking about what to test and how to test it. There was an idea to send golems, but they might not work elsewhere, so they gave up on the idea. Everyone panicked when Map disappeared. Everyone started running after Map, wanting to save him. Gil led the way and told the others to wait here, but Full couldn't leave him alone. Suddenly, the Eye of God showed everyone a vision. Something strange had happened, and no one knew where they were. Heel still went after Map, standing in the portal. Reel followed Hill, then Full. Haynes also decided to go to save and protect the life of Reel, his master. There wasn't much room in the box, so we decided that Haynes would go later. However, Haynes was stuck in the elevator. Everyone was heavily pinned down, and Haynes still couldn't get out of the portal. So they all went off together to no one knows where. They jumped out of the portal and lay down on top of each other. They were in pain, but it was quickly forgotten when they looked up and saw something unusual for them. Something they hadn't seen before. It was a place with a lot of books. They couldn't say for sure now that it was still the island of Sheol Reef. However, Heel thought that this place was similar to the ruins where he found the golems, so it was very possible. The building was very deep, and there were too many books to count. Haynes found Map. Map needed help, according to Haynes. Hill quickly followed Haynes. Map was lying face down and bleeding from his nose. Map was fine, just reading books. Heel cured Map. After which, he suggested that we return to the others, as they are worried. Map got up quietly and picked up the Book of Marks, looked at some of the drawings again, and dropped the book, following Hill. Shell brought everyone with him. Now there are 4 more creatures in this building. Varys noticed that he had a remarkable find in his hands. Hill asked about the book. However, Varys couldn't read it, as the book was written in a language unknown to him. Gil also didn't know the language. Camus was full of enthusiasm. For him, this is a very fun and joyful event. It was an incredible adventure. Teleportation, a library, the remains of an unknown civilization. All of this made his heart flutter. Camus wanted to explore everything around him. They decided to split up into groups. They should have been on their guard. It turned out to be 3 groups. If they found something interesting, they immediately took the book to Hill. Hill was shown a picture book. The drawing was very detailed. Gil and Rihanna were surprised. The city shown in the picture is partially preserved on the Sheol Reef. The mountain in the center of the painting was a view of the current island of Sheol Reef from land. However, Rihanna and Full agreed that it was just a similar picture. Their island looks friendlier, and the size is different. Shell was leading them somewhere in an unknown direction. In the end, they came to a statue of a certain maiden who was very beautiful. It was most likely a goddess. The people who lived in this building before worshipped this goddess. Hill reflected that even the kingdom didn't have such records. Perhaps they found these ruins first. Along the way, they retrieved a couple of magic stones and the hearts of their golem remains. But information about these ruins has not yet been found. Varys was interested in the books from this library, so he decided to study all of them. And Hill could only hope for Varys. Full saw a crack in the wall and assumed there was a passage. After informing Hill about this, she was about to strike with a pickaxe. However, she stopped and they began to search for the entrance. Full asked if she could dig. Gil directed Full, and she slammed the pickaxe firmly against the wall. With a single blow, the wall collapsed. There was something incredible beyond the wall. Behind the wall was a table with 3 changed stones on it. Full woke up. It wasn't the usual routine, making the bed, getting yourself cleaned up. She gathered herself together and headed towards the mine with golem number 15. Full is very worried about digging. Every day, Full digs while the others are asleep. She arrives earlier than anyone else and leaves later than anyone else. Hill is worried about Full. However, Full is very strong and hardy. The worst part is that Hill doesn't know what Full wants. Everyone gathered in the garden and began to discuss the evolution stone they had found. Rihanna had once used one of the evolution stones herself. Camus was surprised to learn that Rihanna was a normal goblin. Ashton and Haynes were also surprised. Camus was probably ashamed. The princess of the Belden tribe was sitting in front of him. There were theories that Rihanna was an elven princess who ran off with Hill. Gil and Rihanna looked confused. They began to refute it with all their might. Camus was interested to see the reactions of these two. Hill shared that finding as many as 3 stones is extremely successful. It was decided to give one of them to Full, since she found them. The second stone was offered to Varys, but he declined, saying that there was a more worthy and suitable candidate. Hill didn't stop and continued to insist that Varys use the stone. Hill noted that the Wizard King's mark was idle. Camus and Haynes were taken aback. The Wizard's King is the strongest mark. It is very strong and useful. Elvin supported the others, saying that Varys' body was already old and it would be better for him to rejuvenate. Rihanna and Full were very clear about how they didn't want Varys to die. Varys wanted his mark to help his companions in the future, so he decided to use the evolution stone instead. With confidence in his eyes, he asked for the stone from Heal. There was only 1 stone left. However, it didn't seem like even one monster wanted to evolve. Some were still using their mark well. Then everyone turned their attention to Camus, as they hadn't seen his mark before. It had a mark that Heal hadn't seen before. It was the mark of the sea dragon. It allows you to control the water. Only newts can control this mark, or so they say. Camus explained that he didn't want to use his mark. Evelyn was surprised, because this mark could help Camus become an ideal sailor. Camus only chuckled in response. Camus didn't want to become like a monster, have a hideous slippery hide that will ruin its beauty. They decided Camus wouldn't evolve. They decided to do an evolution right away. Full was nervous. She held the stone in her hands and asked Rihanna to guide her. To evolve, you need to think about what you want to become and strongly desire it. Full thought hard and deeply about who she wanted to be. The Full always protected everyone. It was Gil, Elvin, the golems, and the rest. If she was left alone, Fol would be in danger. Fol is the daughter of a great and powerful warrior. Fol has evolved. Everyone was very surprised. Maphill closed his eyes to keep the man's nose from bleeding. Fol looked at her reflection through the curtain. As soon as she saw what she looked like, she was very happy. Fol hugged Rihanna, glad that she had succeeded. Fol became bigger and faster, but no one could predict the change in strength. Now, muscles are not the main thing. Fol can use magic. Fol has mana streams, which means she can use magic. Outwardly, Fol hasn't changed much. Rihanna, on the other hand, has changed a lot. Rihanna was confused and justified it with an individual evolution for everyone. Now it was Very's turn. Everyone was surprised, but this time it was because nothing happened. Varys didn't understand it himself. But after a while, Varys started shouting. Everyone was startled, and the next second Varys was shouting with joy and happiness. Now he does not suffer from back pain. Varys' mark also became strange. Mana radiated from her, and its number has greatly increased. Varys wanted to test himself. Varys decided to try one simple spell. He used fire magic. There was an explosion and the temperature rose sharply. Varys apologized, but made sure of his own strength. Now Varys has evolved in appearance as well. His power was so powerful that he could barely control it. Everyone was in shock. Now that Varys is younger, he can use magic again. Everyone was less surprised by the magic than by the change in appearance. Varys didn't understand. So, a mirror was presented to him. Varys was more surprised than anyone else. From surprise, his appearance changed to the old one. As it turned out, the mark of the Wizard King allows you to rejuvenate the body to the age at which the owner will be comfortable using magic. That's what Hill told Varys. He didn't have any more information. Now Varys wanted to study the mark better. Varys studied the mark. He was very smart and diligent, so Hill was confident of his success. The next day, Fol joyous came to the mine. Fol was wearing a new outfit from Rihanna. They started digging. Fol's powers have increased significantly. Now Hill decided to give the mana stones to Fol, since Rihanna and Hill have enough mana, and Varys is strong on his own. However, if Fol didn't use magic, it would all be useless. Hill was explaining to the others how to turn mana into magic, namely the forms of fire, wind, water, and others. Fol had a hard time accepting information and learning magic was difficult for her. But she was very diligent. The theory was akin to torture for Fol. However, in practice, Fol was good. She was good at using magic. Fol was very happy when she succeeded in something. Everything was up to par, but the accuracy of the Fol left much to be desired. But for the first time, it was great. Fol is equal to his father's strength. That worried Alvin. Fol and Elvin often played a game with stones. Fol constantly lost to the princess, after which she was depressed and always cried. At first, Gil didn't understand what Alvin was getting at. Then a realization came to him. Fol didn't like losing and falling behind, especially when her opponent is her best friend. However, it is rather called envy. Work was well underway on Sheol Reef. Soon they completed the port and dock. Right after that, they started building ships. The orcs joined them, but they still wanted to get out of this place faster. Camus and the other orcs could leave this island as soon as they repaired their ships. With the orcs, Hill established a maritime trade. The entire horde of Corvus is waiting impatiently for the hour of departure. Now on the island of Sheol Reef, BC Det developed trade. Hill had already begun to think about trading. Products that will be sold and what they will buy with this money. Sailors carried heavy logs to new lands. They recalled their previous life on the ship and believed that they would soon return to their main work. Suddenly, a snake-like monster leaped out of the water. The sailors were terrified. Gil saw them from afar. He was also at a loss. The monster began to attack the sailors. Camus kicked the huge snake in the face. The snake collapsed to the ground. Camus was clearly not happy about this attack, but he had no trouble getting rid of it. Camus noticed that the sailors fell down from fright. He shouted at them to prepare for a counterattack. The sailors considered the monster a leviathan. Camus informed them that the monster didn't look like Leviathan, it was someone else. Camus continued to attack the serpent. Suddenly Map appeared. Map tossed the saber to Camus to use. Camus caught the saber. Camus cut off the snake's head. Camus praised the orichalcum saber and himself. Gil asked Camus about the monster. Camus told him not to approach. The headless serpent rose. There were 4 others behind him. Camus knew what it was. It's a devil's moray eel. The monster revealed its entire body, 1 torso and 5 heads. Camus only cut off a part of his body. You need to destroy the whole body at once. If not done so, the moray eel will regenerate. Full used flame magic. Full wanted to help Hill and Camus. The moray eel has regenerated. Full was afraid. The snake began to attack Full. Full dodged and ran. Hill helped Full. The moray eel was still chasing Full. Camus reminded him of the only way to destroy the moray eel. Destroy his entire body. They wished they were on the high seas, so they would have destroyed it in 1 blow. But now they can touch the port. Varys thought Full had done a good job distracting the moray eel. Varys decided to try out his new powers. Varys changed his appearance. Varys used water magic. Hill thought the moray eel was being held by ropes, but it was Varys' water magic. Varys opened the way for Lord Hill. Full and Hill used lightning magic to destroy the moray eel's body. Hill thanked Varys and Full for their hard work. Full talked about her long training sessions. The orc sailors felt ashamed that they had not been of any use in the battle. The head of the orcs realized the heart trauma Leviathan had left his subordinates. Night fell. Camus regretted the battle with Leviathan. His subjects are afraid to go to sea. They are afraid of all the big sea creatures. Varys said it was normal to be afraid. Full asked them how often they encountered sea monsters on their way. Elvin expressed his opinion about the fearlessness of the orcs. Varys supported Camus, but Camus couldn't seem to calm down. He continued to regret. Horde of corvus creatures of the sea. But they began to fear him. If they stay on land, the horde will die. Gil, Full, Alvin, and Rhianna all looked at Camus with regret. Rhianna suggested that the orcs build a ship that even a Leviathan couldn't destroy. Hill liked the idea and suggested building the ship entirely out of metal. Camus found the idea interesting, but difficult to execute. The ship itself will be very heavy and will not be suitable for movement. Full started to suggest other ways to build a solid orichalcum ship, but Varys stopped her. It's too complicated, and there's not enough orichalcum to build a ship. Map had an idea. He began to draw a picture on the ground. It was a drawing of a Leviathan. 2 Leviathans. Varys understood Map's plan. They built ladders to Leviathan's corpse. Hill liked Map's idea. Gil was surprised that they were able to kill such a large monster. Leviathan's scales were impenetrable, and neither weapons nor cannon shots, nor even magic, could take him. Hill, the Cave King, began to break through the Leviathan's scales with his axe. The Leviathan scales were quite light, which was the reason for its agility. Mining was very difficult, but they managed to melt many mithril items into tools. They started Perestroika. Camus and Map were responsible for it. Perestroika slowly began to be implemented. The ship turned out to be unimaginably strong and resistant. Everyone in the horde took heart. Gil invited Camus to dinner. Camus was looking at the graves of the orcs who had died in the battle with Leviathan. Gil apologized for not being able to do more. Camus thanked Gil for the funeral. Camus told about the 100-year history of a young man who was able to rally all the orcs tired of wars and go to sea with them. His name was Camus, hero of the orcs, brave fighter of sea battles. His name was passed down from generation to all the heads of the orcs. Camus blamed himself for not even being able to recognize the traitors in the horde. He wanted to bring the horde back to the sea. Camus wanted to acquire the power to carry the Camus name with pride. The order was given to open the gate. Everyone looked out with hope and surprise. A huge sailing ship was sailing towards the port. The ship was very strong and well protected. Its mobility is very good. Its base is made of Leviathan armor, which is hard to believe. It was a Corvus Horde ship. They were all very worried. This was the day when the orcs were to test themselves and their ship. There was no room for doubt. Everyone started preparing to dock. My hands were shaking. Everyone was worried, but my hands were doing their job. The signal was given and the heel began its action. Golem number 16 moved forward. The people from the island were surprised, as they didn't know what to expect. Something began to move toward the ship, and the orcs panicked. Camus was taken aback and informed everyone that a monster was heading towards the ship. The monster floated to the surface, then pulled out its long neck and attacked the ship. No one knew what he had come from, or why the monster had come again. Everyone immediately thought it was Leviathan, which was logical. Everyone was running around the ship in a panic. Camus pulled himself together and told everyone to calm down. A ship made of Leviathan armor cannot be sunk. Also, by carefully looking at the opponent, one could see that it wasn't Leviathan. It was a stone monster. The golem took the form of a Leviathan. No one understood why or how the golem did it. Hela asked others not to interfere. Camus was ready to start simulating a battle with Leviathan. Everyone on the ship was afraid, didn't want to fight, but there was no other way. They were afraid of such a big monster, but without fighting, they were nothing. No one will give up. Camus took out the evolution stone. Everyone was surprised. Camus said goodbye to his beautiful body and ran to the edge of the ship. The ship's captain jumped from it and used the evolution stone. Everyone was watching him closely. He plunged into the water, and light came from him. His body was now covered in scales. Using his mark, Camus launched an attack. Floating on the water and picking up speed, Camus was approaching the monster while it was attacking Camus. The orc captain deftly dodged the stone monster's blows. Camus seemed to have entered a stream. It was as if he was flying in the water. Camus liked that. Camus could swim with incredible speed and control the flow of water. He is the sea god. Camus prepared to strike. The golem defended itself. The stone monster sent Camus flying, pushing him away. Everyone became agitated. Rihanna began to worry about Camus, thinking that even evolving wouldn't help in the battle against such a monster. To protect their captain, the orc ship came into action. The orcs launched the monster's arrows. Orcs are ready to fight to the end with honor. Camus' mark began to glow. He gathered his strength and placed the monster in a water trap. A water tornado formed. Camus took out his phone. Water began to gather around him. This blow was supposed to be decisive. By controlling the flow, Camus delivered the decisive blow. Everyone was watching, waiting for some miracle to happen. And so, the monster was defeated. Hill praised Camus's work, which was natural. Camus also admitted that he was wrong to have doubts about his team. Camus asked if his crew was ready to go to sea. There were shouts of yes. Alvin teased Camus about evolution. Camus' beautiful body was desecrated. Camus spent another week setting up the ship and checking its serviceability. During the discussion, they identified trade items. They gave a farewell feast to the orcs. Under Heel's orders, all the orcs of the Horde of Corvus arrived at the event. Rihanna and Hill stayed on the orc ship before they left. Hill likes boats because that's how he came to the island of Sheol Reef. Rihanna didn't know about this earlier, so she was very surprised. Hill said that he was exiled without honors. Right now, however, Hill is glad that things have turned out this way. Hill likes it better on Hill Island than in the capital of the Kingdom of Sanferis. Camus was on the ship, high up on the deck, so Hill didn't notice him. Camus landed and embarrassed Rihanna and Hill with his speeches. They apologized for boarding the ship without permission. However, it was a Hela ship that had been handed over to the orcs. Camus recognized only Hill. In fact, Camus had business with Hill. Camus needed to tell Hill about his home. Camus interested Hill. Gil asked Camus what he knew about his hometown. Klaus' group betrayed Camus. Klaus' team was bought by the Kingdom of Sanferis. Hill found it hard to believe, as the kingdom hates monsters. However, it was true. Camus met Klaus after the attack on their Leviathan ship. Camus confessed at the time of Klaus' death. The kingdom was going to reward their group if they subdued the monsters of the kingdom. The reason for this, most likely, was the expansion of the territory. Sanfaris is the first kingdom to achieve such greatness. Now they need to expand. Camus asked if Hill was sure that he was exiled to this island for nothing. Gil thought about it, and the pieces of the puzzle began to come together in his head. The Cave King was exiled to Sheol Reef. Only the Cave King could dig up minerals that were previously impossible to find. The only mystery was why Hill hadn't been told anything. These were just Camus' guesses, but they were the most logical. Rihanna suggested that it was because of the underground ruins. Camus did not believe Hill at first, thinking that he was only pretending. However, after a while, Camus realized that Hill was being sincere. Camus warned Hill that someday the people of the kingdom would come to the island. Hill needs to get ready. Gil began to think more seriously about his relationship with the kingdom. Hill thought it was all in the past. It turned out that everything was wrong. They are still tightly bound. The next day, Camus and the entire horde of Corvus set sail. As a gift, Hill gave them a refurbished golem number 16. Now they will trade and reunite their order. Gil told everyone what Camus had said. The destruction of the Belden and Tibris clans was the fault of the Sanfaris kingdom. Elvin was very angry, just like everyone else, but he expressed his anger very clearly. Haynes said it wasn't Hill's fault. Varys might have thought of that, but he couldn't even think of it that way. Hill didn't want to involve his comrades in this, but he knew he couldn't handle it on his own. But everyone was eager to defend their new home, the stone island of Sheol Reef. Hill gathered himself and decided that we should make every effort together. This attitude suited everyone else. Now all they were thinking about was the plan to reinforce Sheol Reef. They began to think through the actions of internal and external reinforcement. It was necessary for them to gain authority, and the kingdom at least respected them a little. Haynes offered to transfer the negotiations. This is what Camus and Rihanna have previously suggested. However, Hill wanted to discover the secrets of the ancient civilization himself. Their group received the status of the Sheol Excavation Group. Some did not know the difference between this group and the usual miners group. Rihanna packed up the group's provisions and they set off. Gil must find out why his father needs the ruins. The first thing they were going to do was explore the portal site. They tried to be as careful as possible not to break anything. They were looking for magical energy and testing Real's reaction. After his approval, they dug carefully. Enough time passed, but they didn't find a single passage between the rooms. Haynes came up with the idea that you can move between rooms through a portal, since the rooms are so far apart. They decided to head back as it was time for dinner. If they were late, Rihanna would be angry. But Real suddenly disappeared. When they found Real, his paws were all bruised. He was trying to dig up the wall. They tried to stop him, but he persisted. They realized that he was trying to dig something up. They looked at the wall and gasped. Deep in the wall were the bones of a bird. But that wasn't the most important thing, because there was an egg next to it. This egg was petrified after being in the ground for a very long time. Even though the egg was already dead, Real didn't want to let go of the egg. Because the prince didn't want to let go of the egg, they took it away. All that remained was to wait. They made an egg holder and placed it on Real's back. Real never left the egg side. He even cared a little too much about the egg. One night, something strange happened. The egg began to glow. They heard the sound of water. You might think it's a hot spring again, but the sound is more unnatural. No one but Haynes heard the sound. Haynes' hearing is very sharp. They decided to follow Haynes' rumor and dig. A little later, Hill also began to hear the sound of water. They walked on and on until Gil almost fell. There was a cliff ahead. It was a good thing Taryn had caught up with Hill. Right in front of them was a huge pillar. The column produced water. The sound was unnatural, as it was a man-made material. The column extended far into the interior. Even Haynes, with his eyesight, couldn't see the bottom. Gil noticed an interesting stone and asked Taryn to pick it up. It was a spring stone. He clings to the stone and supplies mana, resulting in water. Now they can get water anywhere. The longer they dig, the more they find. They decided to continue their search. Now Haynes could hear the sound of mana coming from the wall. Everyone became alert and took a defensive stance. From the wall came the sounds of a terrifying animal, and the amount of mana in it was huge. Everyone could feel it. They had to run and were going to do it, but they didn't have time. The animal was very fast. The creature smashed the wall with ease. Everything was covered in dust, so nothing could be seen. Everyone took up defensive positions just in case. A huge monster crawled out of the wall. Everyone was afraid. The monster looked like a lizard, so everyone decided that this was it. The monster's strength and size were impressive, so Heel guessed that it was a legendary creature. This creature was greatly frightened when he saw the underground people in front of him. Things became even more confusing when the monster spoke in human language. Out of surprise, the black monster began to move back, wary of people. The creature broke the edge of the cliff and went into a fall down. Begging and screaming for help, the monster filled the cave with its own voice. Gil quickly gathered himself together and told Taryn to use her threads, which she did. Many chains covered the strange creature from different directions. They did it in time, but it wasn't over yet, and the monster's size didn't allow it to be lifted as easily as Taryn had been able to lift Heel. Everyone grabbed the threads and started pulling them towards them. The creature was very heavy, so they couldn't do anything. Everyone was surprised when Heel let go of the thread and started running in the opposite direction. He drew stones from his inventory and used the power of design to create a ladder for the creature. Now the monster could easily climb up in one piece. Full was worried about the monster eating its rescuers. The monster was puzzled and asked who these people were. Everyone stood in a stupor and was silent. They took the creature to the surface and fed it. He was probably very hungry. The monster liked the food. He hadn't been eating much lately. The monster was in a great hurry. The creature introduced itself as an earth dragon named Roydon. Everyone was excited to see someone that only legends had ever heard of. It even seemed like something out of the ordinary. However, the dragon was different from how it was described. Hill thought that this dragon was the Lord of the Ruins. However, Roydon didn't really know and wasn't connected to the ruins. He was a dragon from the Earth continent that Heel and the others had never heard of before. It was a continent on a hot land where volcanoes erupted and dragons feuded over territory. This continent was far away from the island of Sheol Reef. Roydon was digging a tunnel through the seafloor. At first, the dragon was frightened at the sight of people, but he was grateful for his rescue. Hill felt that he had lost to Roydon. The dragon could speak a human language. It was thanks to his telepathy skills. He projected his thoughts directly into the heads of his opponents. However, Roydon could not read minds, only what followed the voice. All the power of the Earth Dragons was concentrated in the forehead, namely its horn. Roydon inquired about the tree behind him. Recognizing the tree as Yggdrasil, Roydon added that it was more majestic in life than when it was described. The dragon didn't know much about this tree, only heard about it in fairy tales. Then he asked if the island of Sheol Reef was a continent of paradise. Roydon thought so, since the continent of paradise has various monsters and living organisms living together in the far west. The continent is full of rich women and nature. However, the dragon only saw a small island, so he doubted his guess. In any case, the island of Sheol Reef wasn't the continent of paradise. And the monsters on this island didn't coexist, at least it was hard to tell. The dragon was upset that everything he had been told earlier was a lie. Roydon was looking for a place to relocate. Roydon was going to leave this place and follow his own course. Finally, he decided to give the people on the island a gift. Roydon had come a long way and had many rare items. At the same time, Roydon confessed that he was a traveling merchant. There is always war in the dragon's homeland, so the dragon's cause is flourishing. Roydon goes around the world and trades. The name of Roydon's shop is the Wandering Dragon. The bag contained a huge amount of things. The bag itself was made from the stomach of a single creature and contained almost everything. Most of the goods were made from dragon parts, so all the items were unusual. There were also items for dragons among the goods. Their size was large. There were also dragon eggs in the assortment. You could eat them. Among the eggs, there were different types of dragons. Ice dragon egg, dragons of different flying types. Rockton was surprised when he realized that people didn't use other people as material. It's not unusual for dragons to do this. Using the bodies of their kindred as raw materials, the dragons produced various goods and then sold them. Also, these eggs could be placed in a warm place and wait for them to hatch. This was surprising news for Hill. The first people the dragon sees will be the baby's parents. Now everyone is excited to raise a dragon. It was decided to buy an egg from Roydon. In return, Roydon asked for a couple of Yggdrasil saplings. Gil was surprised that the dragon had asked for so little. Roydon shared that his homeland, the hot earth, used to be a blooming garden. Now that place is more like a wasteland, but with the help of Yggdrasil, Roydon is going to restore the homeland and return it to its former position. However, no one knew the impact on volcanoes. And also in Roydon, the soul of a merchant raged. The trade in Yggdrasil saplings was supposed to be interesting. So Heel bought one egg and a couple of things for Map. Roydon packed all his goods in a bag and was about to leave, but he paused and decided to give Hill a present as a token of gratitude for the meal. The dragon gave Hill the material from which Roydon's bag was made. Hoping for another meeting as a seller and buyers, Roydon left the island of Sheol Reef, spending another night on the surface. Now they have a permanent supplier of various goods. The dragon went to his continent. There are a lot of civilizations in the world that are unfamiliar to Hill. Heel and his team continued to investigate the ruins. Heel wanted to follow the trail of magic stones to find the entrance to the ruins. They had to go down, deep down. The success of this operation was guaranteed by Terran. However, the kobolds made it down on their own. Sending them deeper was already with Rihanna. Her companions waited for her, and they went down together. Everyone was excited, and Rihanna was the strongest. Ashton went first. If Ashton saw something strange, he was supposed to notify Heel and the others. Ashton quickly disappeared from the sight of his companions. Haynes went down with Foal, and Rihanna and Hill went to Terran. Everyone agreed. It wasn't until they all had to go down that Hill realized his predicament. Rihanna gripped Heel's stomach. Hill looked confused. However, they needed to focus. Hill lay awake at night, thinking about exploring the ruins. Map also showed Hill how to take care of the pickaxe. Gil also pondered for a long time why his father needed the ruins. Hill had never been so tired before. This is despite the fact that he has never spoken to his father. Rihanna was very surprised by this, but Heel didn't think anything of it. They only exchanged words a couple of times. Even then, it was more often orders that Heel had to obey. Everyone always obeyed the king and his orders. He was the absolute king and all his plans came true. This time, the plan is for Heel to learn all about the ruins. Rihanna hugged Heel. Now they are even more confident in themselves. They are ready to learn the secret of the Isle of Sheol. Together, they can do anything. All Heel wanted to do was dig, and he's willing to give up his father and the kingdom for that. Now Hill can stand up to his father. Gil and Rihanna jumped into the pit. They saw the light. They made it down. The place was strange. The passageways were in water and littered with rocks. Gil and Rihanna searched for the others. Foal shouted for Hill and Rihanna to see them. They ran down one of the passageways that led deeper. Haynes didn't sense any danger nearby, and the passage shouldn't have been blocked by rocks. But Haynes didn't have time to look around the entire aisle. They should have been on their guard. Rihanna suggested that we all move together, so it's safer. Gil and Full agreed with her. They began to explore the passage and admire the place, while wondering who could have built such a thing. Rihanna assumed they were human beings, because they had seen a statue of a human woman earlier in the library. Haynes said it could have been other creatures they didn't recognize. They still felt that this place was strange. They laughed, calling the inventors of this place underground people. Full heard a sound. She sensed movement in their direction. Haynes reassured them, telling them not to worry, because he could smell things well, and if anyone was coming, he would have smelled them. The slugs approached them. The slugs were afraid of them, so they hurriedly left this passage. They've been living here all this time. Hill remembered that he had also found Shell and Map underground. He didn't know anything about them, and they must have known a lot about the ruins. They found another passage, and decided to move in the direction of the water. They came to a place that seemed familiar to them all. Haynes heard the sound of water, and they moved toward it. Shell sensed something was wrong, and Heel noticed it. In less than a second, the door slammed shut behind them. After that, the entrance was also closed. Hill was about to open the entrance with a mithril pickaxe, but he was stopped by Haynes, who warned him that he could feel a large flow of mana from the walls. Bricks began to come out of the walls and float in the air. They gathered into weapons that were aimed at Heel and the others. Full didn't like it very much. The weapons started attacking. Heel created a shield. Against them was the Guardian of the Ruins himself. Heel used a bolt of lightning to destroy weapons. They started absorbing magic. The next weapon strike was much stronger. They absorbed the enemy's power and used it as their own. It became clear that magic couldn't be used. They even absorbed shield magic. Things are bad. Heel assigned Hengesu to protect them, and Ashton to deal with the enemies using physical skills. Ashton was ready to fight. Ashton quickly began to get rid of his enemies. Full, Gil, and Rihanna were all in turmoil and supported Ashton. The enemies began to move together toward Ashton from all directions. Gil began to worry about Ashton. He asked Haynes to help Ashton, but Haynes believed in Ashton's abilities and looked after him from afar. There weren't just a lot of weapons, they worked together. Ashton thought it was funny. Ashton began to use his arrows. Ashton got really excited. He killed them in one go. Full, Hill, and Rihanna couldn't believe it. Haynes was only once again convinced of Ashton's powers. The enemies were golems. Each of them had cores that needed to be destroyed. They were very unusual golems. They used the magic absorption stone, flight stone, and black iron. These golems could survive high temperatures and float in the air. Haynes sensed someone approaching. The gate began to rise. Haynes didn't like it. A much larger golem entered the room. A huge golem entered the room. He looked like a mix of a man, a horse, and a knight. The golem started to say something. This language was incomprehensible to them. Gil tried to talk to him, to explain who they were, but the golem changed its arm shape to a sword. He leaped at them. Haynes began to defend himself. They started a fight. Heel tried to stop them, because they came in peace, but he couldn't. The golem attacked without hearing them. Haynes and Ashton tried to disable the golem without killing it, but it wasn't that easy. Even hitting him was a challenge. Full tried to use magic against it, not thinking about the fact that this golem also had a magic-absorbing crystal. They didn't know what else to do. The golem was preparing to attack. Heel used the King of the Cave Stone. Everyone hid behind a rock. A few of the golem's punches couldn't break through it, but it mustered its strength and was able to break through it. The golem was very strong. They had already rejected the idea of catching it, since they couldn't even deal serious damage to the golem. The golem was also very fast, keeping up with all of Ashton's movements. The golem was so powerful that it was fighting both kobolds at the same time. Hill came up with a brilliant idea. Rihanna understood immediately. They decided to immediately start implementing the idea. They used Real's power. Gil hit the concrete with the pickaxe, and water began to flow out of the concrete. Ashton and Haynes moved away from the walls. Heel, Full, and Rihanna used triple freeze. The entire floor turned to ice. The golem couldn't move so fast on it, which caused it to lose its speed advantage. Terran used his web to block out the golem's movements. Haynes and Ashton decided that this was the perfect moment to attack. But the golem untangled itself and leaped up. It hit Ashton and Haynes in different directions, so hard that the walls cracked. This speed shocked everyone. It turned out that the golem had also changed its legs to cones with sharp ends. The golem attacked Heel. Heel told Real to run for his life, but Shell came to the rescue. Right in front of Shell, the golem stopped. Everyone was worried about Shell and was at a loss. The golem changed its voice and its body began to open up. Inside the golem was a little girl. The golem and the girl exchanged a few words, after which the girl asked Heel who they were. Full was surprised that the girls knew their language. No one knew who the girl was. The girl inquired about the lineages of the creatures in front of her. Gil and the others stood there in complete shock as to how and where the girl had come from. This girl is a child who came out of a voice in the depths of the ruins. The girl was a surprisingly fast learner, and they drew these conclusions based on the fact that she could already speak a human language. The girl took a step, but fell. Everyone was scared, but the reaction of the voice next to her and the girl herself was absolutely no. The girl said something in an incomprehensible language, lying on the ground and taking her time to get up. The golem lifted her up, and she returned to her upright position. The golem began to understand something as it stared at the hole. She was on edge. The girl continued to speak in her own language with a stony face. Suddenly, everyone heard a commotion. It is not clear where the noise came from, but over time everyone understood from which side the sound was coming. Everyone turned their attention to the entrance and reinforcements were arriving from there. They were strange creatures that looked like weapons. Full was very surprised. However, the girl stopped the inhabitants of the island, asking them, perhaps even ordering them not to attack the Argo. Heel and the others were not familiar with the name. As they later realized, these golems that came to the rescue are Argo. Creatures called Argo flew to the hole and began to make something using their body parts different devices. Argo began to carry pipes, stones, and other materials to the canal, which was very strange. It took them a while to realize that the Argo were rebuilding the channel. As the girl held out her hand, one of the Argos flew up to her. It was logical to think that the girl had the ability to control these golems. The girl looked accusingly at Heel and his mockingbirds, asking what they had done with the Argo that had come flying towards her. That Argo fell apart. Gil began to justify himself to the girl, saying that Rego had attacked first and the only solution was to defend himself. The girl was very angry and showed it with all her appearance. All Heel could do was apologize to Nona again, and that's what happened. The girl considered the fact that Heel had come to them from the surface. Heel explained that they call the surface Sheol and once again apologized for the destruction. Heel also explained the reason why he and his friends needed to learn more about the ruins. Namely, he told a story about his father and how he wanted to know the secret of the ruins. The girl thought only of the surface. Fixated on it, she repeated the word. The girl asked Heel if the idea that the place where the girl herself is located underground is correct. Hill didn't understand the girl at first, so he asked her again. Gil and the others were all talking about the ruins, which made the girl realize that there weren't many people there. Everyone was taken aback and stopped understanding the meaning of what was happening. Haynes plucked up his courage and asked, "Does this girl know about the place she is in?" The girl didn't know anything about the ruins and didn't have a drop of information. Everyone was surprised. Gil thought that the girl had lost her memory. Everyone was wondering who the girl was and why she was guarding that place. The girl was just doing her duty. The only thing the girl remembered was her duty to protect those lands. Gil still didn't understand. At that moment, Full sneezed. Full apologized for interrupting. Full explained her behavior by saying that it was too cold in that place. Hill asked the girl to move to a warmer location and discuss all the details there. The girl didn't understand the reason why they wanted to move. After explaining that it was too cold in that place, Heel fell silent. There was no response from None. She just didn't say anything. The girl, who hadn't responded to Heel's earlier remark, changed the subject. She was asking about Shella. Shell saved them from the girl's attack. The girl didn't like it, so she put a gun on the owl right next to Shell. The girl removed the weapon from Shell's body and asked the others to follow her. Hill thanked the girl. Everyone was about to move on, but Gil stopped and asked the girl's name. The girl just looked at Heel questioningly. The girl gave a name to the golem as well, but didn't mention her own. Every Sheol Reefer introduced himself. They are Rihanna, Heel, Full, Real, Taryn, Shell, Ashton, and Haynes. Only at that moment did the girl understand what was being said. She introduced Nona. Nona is a beautiful name. Now they've officially met. Nona noticed that Heel's abilities were unusual and even strange. Hill couldn't quite figure out what Nona was talking about, so he just assumed she was referring to his mark. They walked on in silence. There was a lot of Argo in the hallway. Gil was a little afraid of them. Nona said something in her own language again. As long as Nona was around, Heel and his companions didn't have to worry. The Argos won't attack them. Nona didn't know the name of the language she spoke. She never spoke to anyone other than the golem. You might think that Nona is lonely from this, but she is alien to this feeling loneliness. She felt absolutely nothing. With each passing minute, Nona was developing her communication skills in the Gila language. She was a very fast learner, so it made it easy for her. Full offered to show Nona around the library. She must have understood what was written in the book. However, to their regret, Nona couldn't leave the place she was in. The Full meant Nona no harm at all. It was only important for them to uncover Sheol's past. However, Nona still couldn't leave that place. She didn't remember anything except that she must never leave her place and must guard it. She was sure that if she came out of that place, she would have a lot of problems. The boys decided to bring None's books themselves next time. They arrived at their destination and were ready to open the door. Hill noticed the Cave King's mark on the statue underground. Full assumed that the girl in the statue had a similar mark, but Ashton didn't think so. It was something that looked more like a signature. Full was surprised by this. This means that the creator of the statue owned the mark of the King of Caves. Nona thought only Heel had the mark. Full showed her her mark and asked about it. Nona didn't have one. Full thought it was odd. Everyone should have a tag. Hill found it all very strange. A life without marks. The kingdom must have known something about that. Full told Nona about her mark and Rhianna's. Full then explained about Heel's mark, about its unusualness, rarity, and peculiarity. Gil considered Camus' words about the planning of the treasure and its tag. The more he thought about it, the weirder it all seemed. Gil inquired about the former kings of the cave. He'd asked Nona about his mark, but she'd never seen anything like it before. Nona found Gila's curiosity odd. Gil explained his father's order. Hill did not know the purpose of his travels and conquests. Nona asked Heel if he would like to know the reason for his arrival. Hill didn't quite want to, but he was still interested in his father's idea. Hill would like to live his own life. Nona and the golem were once again communicating in a strange language. Gil, Full, and Rhianna were beginning to worry. Nona allowed them to move freely around the ruin, but only under her supervision. Nona made another condition. Only Heel and 3 others could have gone on. That was fine with Hill, and he thanked Nona. Suddenly, night fell. Everyone was in shock. Is there really a change of day and night here? Having made a difficult journey, they completely forgot about the time. Everyone was about to head back, but Rhianna pulled out her bag filled with food. They stayed right underground for the night. In order not to frighten the remaining people from above, Ashton went to them to tell them that everything was in order. So Ashton left the band. Rhianna invited Nona to dinner. Nona didn't need food, which she said bluntly. It seemed rude to Full, but Rhianna reassured her that it was fine. Rhianna wrapped Nona's food. Nona was gone. Full didn't like the fact that Nona didn't even thank them, but it seemed normal to Hill. He found it more strange that such a small girl lived alone underground. Haynes brought up the subject of ruins and people again. The ruins were indeed suitable for human habitation. There was everything: water, vegetables, insects, fish, and even the alternation of day and night. It was too much like the surface. Full found it odd that Nona was made for protection, but there was no one to protect the place from. Over dinner, they discussed Nona and the upcoming exploration of the ruin that might bring back Nona's memories. Full noticed something glowing in the distance. This light was getting bigger and bigger. She quickly told Hill and the others about it. They were all alarmed by this. Shell also began to glow. They were slugs. They began to glow. They reminded Rhianna of stars. Nona sat by the statue of the girl, feeling lonely. Morning came and everyone woke up. Bolshin came. Hill greeted him and asked about Nona's whereabouts. Nona was still sleeping inside the bastion. Rhianna thought it was funny. Sleepily, Nona asked about the study. Hill suggested we wait for Ashton. Suddenly, someone called out to him. It was Varys and Ashton. Hill and Ashton were worried about Varys, but Varys was fine. Varys was curious to explore the ruins. The general was also going to come, but he was busy defending. After talking to Hill, Varys started looking around and getting to know Nona. Varys was too interested in the research. they chose a group to study. Hill, Rihanna, Varys, and Haynes were all ready to move. Foal and the others waited for them in the garden, where they camped for the night. Nona left Bigman to look after them. She also ordered him to eliminate everyone if they were a threat to him. The seriousness of the order became clear to Foal. Hill began discussing the study with Nona. Shell was glued to his leg, and he wanted to go with them. Gil tried to leave him, but Nona let him go with them. They went through a huge forest and came to the wall at the entrance. Nona said something in a language that everyone couldn't understand, and the door opened. They weren't allowed to touch anything, just look. But Nona's presence still made Heel happy. They could open the doors easily and not get lost in the maze-like room. They confirmed their theory that the entire ruin was built so that people could live there. Nona continued to complete her task. Varys asked her many questions, and Hill tried to find a clue that would help restore Nona's memories. Nona read the lines from Varys' book that made everyone confused. Varys just wanted to learn the language. Hill found the workshop and asked Nona about it. Here, she rebuilt the Argo that Ashton had destroyed. Varys noticed something more interesting. It's azure gold, a very unusual metal. It's what a giant is made of. Hill wanted to ask for a couple of minerals and show them to Mappa. Gil asked Haynes for help, and they began to raise a huge stone hand. Gil found another door and asked Nona about it. Nona couldn't open it. Heel asked if he could try to break this door down a bit, but because of Nona's expression, Heel didn't take the risk. Gil accidentally brushed his marked hand against the door handle, and it opened. Everyone was at a loss. Outside the door, a long flight of stairs waited for them, the end of which was not visible. Rihanna was still surprised that Gil had opened the door. Before he could turn around, Nona was already heading down the stairs. Hill and Varys started to stop Nona. They didn't know what was waiting for them there. But Nona continued to descend, and she did it confidently. They followed her down the stairs. They had been walking for a very long time. Gil's knees began to ache. Even though Heel was telling Nona to slow down, she was still going down fast. In this situation, Hill didn't much like Nona's stubbornness, but Rihanna guessed that they might find people as determined as herself down below. That was a suggestion Varys found impossible. There was no one like Nona in the entire garden. Rihanna still believed that there were such people somewhere, but they just couldn't see each other because of the closed door. Hill fully supported Rihanna's suggestion. Hill bumped into Haynes. There was a landslide ahead. There was nothing of value in these stones, so Nona allowed Hill to destroy them. Hill armed himself with a pickaxe. He cleared a path for them. They got to the strange device. Nona didn't know what these devices were. There were a lot of them, and they looked like tanks or containers. Haynes noticed that there was a very strange and unpleasant smell in this place. His nose started to go numb. After his words, Heel also began to smell it. It smelled like chemicals. The entire place was completely ruined. The Argo didn't attack here. Hill thought they were destroyed, but Nona said it was the mana, it was over. Or they just couldn't work on this floor. Haynes saw the huge scratches on the wall and showed them to Hill. They were scratches made by claws. They were bloodied and old. They assumed that someone still lived on this floor. They continued moving. Haynes had trouble recognizing odors because of the chemicals, but he couldn't smell anything suspicious. They went on and on. During their entire stay there, they did not find any evidence that anyone lives there. This place was very strange. Rihanna and Hill got scared. They began to worry that someone might suddenly attack them. They were going to finish exploring this floor. Haynes suddenly stopped them. He told them to keep their voices down. Everyone fell silent, waiting for Haynes' comments. Haynes quickly drew his weapon and fired a bow at the ceiling. The arrow hit the ceiling, but suddenly blood began to flow. Gil was perplexed. Haynes smelled the bloodlust of a huge monster. It fell to the ground. It looked like both a lizard and a monster. It was a chimera. Haynes managed to kill him with the first shot. Hill was very surprised. He had heard about the chimera lish in the legends. Varys was equally surprised. He'd never seen a chimera before, either. Haynes told everyone to get ready. There were 3 more chimeras. Gil only now noticed that they were all around them. Haynes apologized for not smelling their presence earlier. The chimeras started attacking. Heel used flame magic against the chimeras. The chimeras managed to dodge the attacks. They were smart. Haynes was shooting arrows at them. Varys came to Hill's aid. He used wind magic. The chimeras didn't die. They're pretty tough creatures. Rhianna didn't like it. They were not in an advantageous position. Rhianna was going to use her magic. Suddenly, a chimera attacked her. Rhianna didn't even have time to put up a shield. It was very unexpected. Gil was worried about Rhianna, which was in vain. Rhianna fended off the chimera with her fist. Gil was surprised. Rhianna hit the chimera with her orichalcum knuckles. Her strike was very precise and strong, but she was amplifying it with lightning magic. Rhianna's thunderous strike was so strong that she managed to take down the chimera. Rhianna and Hill used fire magic to completely destroy the chimera. Varys praised the princess. Haynes became confident of their victory. Varys kept up with the others and also killed a couple of chimeras. Heel began to rejoice at the victory, but his joy was stopped by a warning shout from Haynes. More chimeras were running toward them. Their number was incalculable. Varys suggested that they retreat, because it was very difficult to defeat so many chimeras. Varys used a combination of ice and fire elements. The chimeras were lost in the fog created by Varys. It was decided to run away. This is the only chance to get out of there alive. After a while of retreating, Heel was exhausted. They couldn't run far from the chimeras. Gil asked Nonai if it was possible that chimeras, like Argo, were protecting the ruins. Nona supposed not. Argo is in standby mode at these locations. Most likely, they were deliberately disabled. They had only two options, either turn on Argo or destroy all the monsters. Suddenly, Nona pointed to the corner of the wall by the aisle. There was a silhouette behind him. It was a man. Everyone was noticeably surprised by this. Hill thought he was a friend of Nona's, but Nona didn't even know him. Gil ran over to meet the man, inquiring about his condition. Hill didn't think the man understood him, so he asked Nona to translate. Suddenly, Haynes realized that it wasn't a human being. He shouted to Hill to come back. It was also a chimera. The chimera suddenly attacked Hill. Rhianna leapt to Hill's side and helped him dodge the blow, feeling very worried about Hill. Haynes and Varys started attacking the chimera, attacking it with their strongest techniques. They attacked both with arrows and with their own hands. Hill clearly didn't like the idea of Rhianna sacrificing herself to save his life. Rhianna's life was so much more important to him. Rhianna apologized for this and said that she was fine to calm down Hill. What was more interesting to Haynes now was how a chimera might resemble a human. After all, a chimera is a monster. Suddenly, the seemingly dead chimera rose up and became much bigger and stronger. Her wounds quickly healed, and it was as if she had evolved. Chimera shows its real appearance, a mixture of animals: lion, snake, dragon. The chimera roared loudly and viciously, showing its strength and anger. It seemed too big, even to kobold Haynesis, but that didn't stop him. Haynesis leapt forward, arrow in mouth, trusting in his own strength. The chimera was about to attack, but Haynes drew his sword and delivered a striking blow to the chimera's arm, cutting it in half. Haynes landed another couple of impressive punches on the chimera's arms and face, making the monster feel worse. Even though it was difficult for the chimera to move in a confined space, it was quite fast. This chimera was regenerating, but not as quickly as Haynes had imagined. Haynes used the hunter's mark, which allowed him to see all the vital points of any creature. He was going to stab them all. Suddenly, Haynes was overcome with fear, as if the chimera had so many heads of lions and snakes. The chimera started making terrible, deafening noises. All the hunters could not listen to this terrible noise that pierced everyone's ears. It was especially difficult for Haynes, who had the best hearing among all the other hunters. The chimera took advantage of this and scratched Heinesu with its huge claws, causing heavy wounds on Heinesu's body. He fell to the ground, exhausted. The chimera began to exhale flames like a dragon. Varys, along with Hill, tried to resist his magic. However, the chimera possessed monstrous strength, and the efforts of Hela and Varys did not lead to anything. Rhianna was about to help them, But Haynes interrupted her. Haynes also wanted to help his comrades. He began to tell Rihanna his plan of action. Rihanna was worried about him. She asked him to just lie there with those wounds. Nona found it all pointless. Rihanna's help would be useless, and the chimera would simply fight off her attack. And Haynes couldn't even walk to it in this state. Nona pulled a strange jar of rock out of her bag. This is the only way to defeat this chimera. Varys and Gila's magic was waning. They needed to come up with ways to protect themselves. Suddenly, something shot at the wall. It was Argo. Nona used the mana vials to activate them. The chimera started attacking Nona. Varys and Hill tried to come to her aid, but the chimera took them under its wing. Nona could only run away. A human head poked out of the chimera's head. He said something to Nona in a strange language. Haynes realized that the chimera wasn't mimicking a human. The man himself merged with the chimera. After Nona's conversation with the human, the chimera hit the ground, and a huge snake came out from the other side. A cave spider thread was flying out of his mouth. Its thread wrapped around Shell, and Rihanna wanted to come to his aid, but the web bound her as well. An unknown person took Shella and Rihanna hostage. Hill was very angry with him and demanded to let them go. The small chimeras reappeared. Gil began to kill them. The serpent wrapped Shell and Rihanna completely in a web and began to consume them. Varys, Hill, and Haynes were horrified by what was happening. The serpent plunged into the cliff. Gil was very scared. He couldn't save her even though she was close. Varys, Hill, and Haynes couldn't save Shell and Rihanna until they got rid of the chimeras. They killed them one by one, but there were too many of them. Hill was overwhelmed with negative emotions. Fear, pain, hatred, all of it accumulated in him, and he was ready to kill everyone in his path. These emotions strengthened him and hardened him. Because of the loss of loved ones, he was so angry that he was able to use his power to the maximum. He was able to use the tag. His mark lit up and began to destroy everything in its path, the ground and monsters. One of his marks was able to destroy a huge crowd of chimeras. Varys and Haynes couldn't believe their eyes. This magic was too strong. Heel didn't know what had happened. He didn't believe that it was his magic that had helped destroy so many chimeras. Heel's arm began to shake and ache. He now has an ability that is different from the rank of the mark, and it is very dangerous. If you do not comply with the rank restrictions, security cannot be guaranteed. This is the mark of the Cave King. Varys inquired about Hill's condition. Gil hid the mark and hurried to save Shell and Rihanna. Hill noticed Nona's disappearance. He thought she'd been caught, too. Nona was sitting in the barrier under the rocks with Argo. The Argo protected her. Nona scolded Heel for ruining a lot of things, for which Heel apologized to her. Varys and Haynes were still worried about the chimeras. Nona knew where they needed to go. She could feel that person's presence. Gil wanted to go to them as quickly as possible, but Nona reassured him. The chimera does not feed on its prey immediately, but only when it is hungry. They still had time. Shell and Rihanna are still alive. Nona showed the others the Argo function. They keep a map of the ruins inside them. They went to rescue Shell and the princess. No one knew the details of the chimera that had stolen them, or its plans, but they were not afraid to go straight to them. Hill asked Nona what the man had told her, to which she said only that she was defective. Gil was shocked by these words. Nona assumed they knew each other. Gil began to think about their connection. Nona could sense that person's presence, and they were definitely not having an ordinary connection. Chimeras came running around the corner of one of the front turns. Haynesis, Hill, and Varys went straight ahead. Rihanna opened her eyes and saw the imprisoned Shell standing next to her. She was tied up, too. She noticed it later, and when the realization came, Rihanna began to struggle and try to get out. She remembered that she was caught by a chimera and calmed down a little, regaining her composure. The chair moved by itself. Shella and Rihanna were being taken somewhere unknown. They needed to break free of the shackles and join up with the others. Rihanna tried her best, but it was all in vain. The hooded and cloaked girl said the same thing to Rihanna. This girl's communication style was the same as Nane's. There was little chance of escape. Rihanna asked the girl if she protected the land as much as Nona did. Rihanna tried to justify herself, claiming that their team did not intend to harm anyone. Rihanna also added that Nona allowed them to enter. The girl asked if they came from the surface, and so it was. There were about 200 people on Sheol at that time. The girl took off her hood. She introduced herself as Sir. The girl was surprisingly similar to Nona, so Rihanna was confused. Rihanna's surprise was boundless. The reason Nona is so similar to Sira is that they are both creatures of the same type. Nona and Sira are just dolls. They are similar to humans, but their behavior is completely different. After thinking about it more, Rihanna noticed that Nona was indeed acting strange for a human. She talked strangely and refused food like a robot. Nona's actions were considered strange to humans. Plus, she has no memories. The only thing Seraph didn't understand was why Nona didn't kill them. The only conclusion was that Nona was defective. Rihanna came to Nane's defense, saying that she takes her work very seriously. Looking at the behavior of humans from the other side, it is also strange, as people felt sympathy and compassion even for robots like Seraph and Nona. The chair carried Reen and followed Seraph further. They ended up in a place with a bunch of different incubators. Rihanna was very surprised. Chimeras were stored in the liquid. They were all useless. Zodia was strong, but the research stopped after she stopped obeying orders. Then one sample escaped and began to multiply. Rihanna was worried that it might be dangerous, but chimeras are just beasts. The beasts won't go after the stronger one. They arrived in another room. The door opened. The room had huge incubators with telomeres floating in liquid. The body looked horribly human. However, it was not a person, but only a vessel. They were called Zauma living vessels. These vessels have no flaws and they do not make mistakes. They were designed for the dominant species on the surface. Their purpose is to establish contact. They are not suitable as weapons. Zauma is Sira's best creation. However, Seraph's work will end there. In the corridor, Rihanna's comrades killed everyone. Nona helped Hill and the others. Nona warned the others that the chimera they were going to fight was much stronger than the previous ones. But no one cared about winning. The only goal was to free and save the princess and Shell. If all goes wrong, Alvin will apprehend the chimera, and Heel will save his friends. So they agreed. They will definitely save Rihanna and Shell.